Hello everyone, I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. I got the apartment after my divorce because I needed a quiet place where no one would bother me. The building manager said the place was clean and cheap. He did not say much else. There were a few empty units on my floor. The hallways were dim and the lighting flickered sometimes, but I did not care. I just wanted somewhere to sleep after work. The first night when I came back late, I smelled old paint and dust. I turned the corner near my door and saw a shape. It stood in the corridor near the wall across from my door. It was tall, about a head taller than me, and its outline was not solid. It did not have a clear face, just a blurry darkness like a smudged stain on the air. I stopped and stared, holding my keys tight. It raised its arm and pointed at my apartment door. It did not make any sound. It did not move. Closer, I swallowed, my throat dry. I could feel my heart beating. I stepped forward slowly, keeping my eyes on it. It stayed still, arm out, finger extended at my door. I tried saying hey, but it did not react. I fumbled with my keys, got the door open and stepped inside. I looked back. It was still there. I closed the door hard, locked it and stood with my back against it, breathing fast. The silence in my place was heavy. When I looked out the peephole, I saw nothing. The corridor was empty. The next day after work, I hesitated before going up the stairs. The building was quiet. I heard no voices, no TVs from other apartments on my floor. I looked around. The corridor lights hummed. When I got near my unit, I saw that shape again, same spot, same position. My stomach felt tight. I tried stepping closer, but my legs felt heavy. The thing pointed at my door like before. I could not see any eyes, but I felt watched. I hurried inside, locked the door and checked around my apartment. Everything was normal. The bedroom, room, kitchen and living room were empty and dull. Just my basic furniture and a small TV. I wanted to forget about it, but I kept thinking about that shape. On the third night I came back late. I did not see it at first. I relaxed a bit and walked down the hall. Suddenly it flickered into view a few feet away from my door. I yelped and backed up, almost dropping my bag. It pointed at my door. I noticed it was slightly taller now, or maybe I just paid closer attention. Its outline seemed to sway a bit, like something not fully there. I got inside and slammed the door. After that I started leaving my lights on all night, but that did not help. Around midnight the TV in the living room clicked on by itself, showing static. I turned it off. A few minutes later it turned on again. I unplugged it later. I woke up to it buzzing again. It was still unplugged. Over the next week the weirdness got worse. The fridge smelled every morning, even when I had just bought groceries the night before. Vegetables and fruit turned black and soft overnight. Bread got moldy in less than a day. Milk curdled in sealed cartons. I started buying takeout every evening instead of storing food. I tried to ignore the whispers I thought I heard in the walls at night. Sometimes late at night I pressed my ear against the bedroom wall and heard soft murmurs. They were not words I could understand, just a quiet low sound that made my skin feel cold. Every night the shape appeared. It always stood in the corridor by my door, pointing silently. Its presence made the air heavy. Whenever I approached it did not move or react. If I tried to talk to it, it stayed quiet. I could not feel a breeze from it, but the air near it felt colder. I considered running past it, but whenever I tried to move close, my chest tightened and I backed off. I tried to ask the building manager about it the next day. He was not around. His office in the lobby was locked and no one answered the bell. I knocked on a few apartment doors during the afternoon. No one answered. The building seemed empty. There were no footsteps in the halls, no voices behind doors, just me and that thing at night. One evening I waited outside until it was dark, hoping it would not appear if I was late enough, but when I climbed the stairs it was there waiting. I tried rushing it, I tried charging forward to see what would happen. My hand went right through it, my arm felt cold and numb for a few seconds. The shape stayed in place pointing. I almost fell, staggered through it and unlocked my door. I turned and found it on the other side, now still pointing at my door. I could not understand how it got there. My heart pounded. I locked myself inside again. After a few nights of this, I started getting headaches and felt tired all the time. I could not sleep well. The whispers in the walls got louder and the TV kept turning on by itself at random hours. The food kept rotting, so my kitchen smelled like garbage. I tried cleaning and spraying air fresher, but the smell came back within hours. I started eating out every meal. I spent less time in the apartment. After work I hung around a bar or cafe until late, not wanting to go home. Eventually I had to sleep. One night I tried sleeping in the living room with all the lights on and the TV removed from the outlet at around 2 a.m. I woke up to static again. The TV was on even though I had unplugged it and taken the cable out. My chest felt tight. I got up and pulled the plug again. It turned off. I sat down, heart racing. Suddenly I heard a creak from the hallway. The door to my apartment opened by itself. I froze. I saw the shape standing right at my threshold. It did not cross the doorway but stood there pointing towards my bedroom. I shouted, "What do you want?" No answer. I ran to the door and tried to shut it. The shape vanished as the door closed. The next day I called the landlord. He said he could let me out of the lease if I paid a big penalty. I did not have the money. I tried to get a loan, but it did not work out. I tried looking for another place, but everything was expensive. I started leaving before dawn and coming home very late just so I spent as little time there as possible. One night I tried talking calmly to the shape. I stood in the corridor facing it and said, "I know you want me to go inside, but why?" It just pointed. I stepped into my apartment and left the door open. The shape stayed outside, still pointing. Nothing happened inside. The bedroom looked normal. The bed was still in place. The dresser was the same. The closet empty except for my clothes. I closed the door and locked it. The whispers seemed to come from inside the wall. Sometimes I tapped the walls and heard a hollow sound. Once I peeled back some old wallpaper. Underneath were cracked plaster walls. When I tapped there I felt a slight vibration like something moved behind the walls. I tried calling the police. They sent a patrol car. 2 officers knocked on my door the next evening. When I opened it, the shape was not in the corridor. They found nothing strange. The wiring looked old but functional. They saw nothing unusual. They left after they were gone. The shape returned, pointing silently. I tried recording the shape on my phone on playback. The corridor looked empty, no sign of it. I tried leaving flour on the floor overnight to see if there were footprints. In the morning the flour was scattered but no clear footprints, just weird smears. I tried leaving food out for it. In the morning the food was spoiled or vanished. I tried sleeping at a friend's place one night. When I came back in the morning everything was as I left it. The smell was worse though, and the fridge had new dark stains inside. A few times I thought about confronting it in a more aggressive way. I tried swinging a broomstick through its shape. It passed right through without resistance. I tried shining a flashlight directly at it. The light went through it, hitting the wall behind. No effect. I tried yelling and cursing at it, but it did not respond. I started noticing other odd things. Doors in my apartment would not stay where I left them. I would close the bathroom door and later it would be open. I once piled chairs in front of my front door to keep it from opening. In the morning the chairs were placed back by the table as if nothing happened. I once found the TV moved to a different room after I woke up another time. I left my phone charging on the coffee table and found it on the kitchen counter instead, still plugged in. Somehow I locked all my windows, but they would be open when I got home. I tried removing the light bulbs from lamps, but even with no bulbs I sometimes saw a faint glow at night. I stopped eating at home completely. The sink water tasted stale no matter how long I let it run. The bathroom faucet dripped even when closed tight. The place always smelled old and damp like a basement. The building was so quiet that every sound I made echoed in the hall. Sometimes I shouted but got no reply. I tried leaving the apartment door open and walking down the hall to find another tenant. The shape appeared farther down the corridor, always between me and the exit stairs pointing back towards my unit. If I tried going to the stairs at night, the lights flickered and I found myself back at my floor again. The building felt like a maze after dark. During the day I could leave normally, but I had to return eventually. I needed my clothes, my possessions, and I had nowhere else to live permanently. I tried calling my ex-wife, but she did not pick up. My friends did not believe me. One friend came over once in the afternoon. He saw nothing strange. He left before evening that night. The shape was there again, pointing. After a while I stopped trying to talk to it. I just went straight inside without looking. I tried to ignore the spoiled food and the static on the TV. I threw the TV out in the trash downstairs. The next night the TV was back in my living room. I had no idea how. I tried removing everything from my bedroom, leaving it empty except for the bed. It did not help. The presence still pointed at that door. Night after night I tried sleeping in the hallway. One night I sat there with my back against my door staring at the shape. After a few hours my eyes got heavy. I heard a distant whisper, felt a chill on my neck, and when I looked again the shape was closer. I jumped up and rushed inside. I finally decided to leave everything behind. I did not care about the lease or the penalty. I packed a single bag with clothes and left early in the morning when the building doors were normal and the shape was gone. I walked out into the street without looking back. I did not return. I never picked up my security deposit or any belongings. I let them stay in that place with that silent shape that never said what it wanted. I did not care. I just left. I still remember the smell of that place. I remember the dry, dusty odor hitting my nose the moment I pushed open that heavy door. The hinges gave a low metal shriek that echoed down the empty halls. Inside the light was weak. Small lamps on old tables, shaky beams over shelves coated in grime. Most of the books looked as if they had never left their spots. I saw a few scattered chairs, some missing their cushions, and at least one had a broken leg. I knew I would be alone there. Nobody ever came to that library anymore. That was why I chose it. I was tired of bright rooms and friendly librarians. I wanted to be where nobody would question me, where nobody would stop me from touching every old volume I could find. I was looking for something that I had heard about in passing, an old name, a name that was never spoken out loud anymore. I wanted to confirm it existed. I had nothing else to do, and I hoped I might find something interesting. The stories I researched, old urban legends, half-forgotten rumors, strange local tales, usually turned out to be worthless, but I had a feeling about this one. I do not know why. I just did. The first day I came there I found only dust and silence. I ran my finger along the shelves. I coughed a bit. I heard my own breathing echo. The old wooden floor creaked under my shoes. I saw nothing else. No visitors, no staff, only a single old desk near the entrance with a small lamp and a guest book. The guest book's pages were blank. For the last 5 years I signed my name anyway. I dropped my bag on a table. I started scanning the aisles. There were no proper labels, just some signs that had peeled off. I had to guess where older records might be stored. I pulled out volumes with worn covers and pages stuck Together I read titles that meant nothing to me. After a few hours I found nothing helpful, only old newspapers bound together. I put them back. The place felt cold. I rubbed my arms to keep warm. Outside it had been warm, but inside it was always a few degrees cooler. I found a corner with a few chairs and a small reading table. I picked a spot and let my eyes rest. I did not fall asleep, but I felt myself drifting. Then I heard something. It sounded like a small thump, maybe a book hitting the floor. I stood up and looked around. There was nobody in sight. The stretched out light bulbs flickered in the distance. I thought I saw movement, but maybe it was my eyes playing tricks. I said nothing out loud. I just stayed quiet and listened. I heard no more sounds. I went back to my seat and told myself I was just tired. On the second day I returned around the same hour. I sat down and went through more shelves. I found a back room hidden behind a tall bookcase that was placed awkwardly. I noticed that if I squeezed through a small gap I could enter a space. With older materials, the back room had no window. The light was weaker. I carried a small flashlight from my bag. The beam shook slightly as I moved. The floor there was rough and uneven. There were crates filled with old journals. I flipped through them. Pages were hard to separate. The smell was stronger. They're damp and moldy. I felt a slight pressure in my chest. After a few minutes I coughed. The dust was too thick. I decided to leave that room and return. After a short break, when I turned, I thought I saw a shape behind the shelves, something tall. I could not see a face. There were no features. It seemed like a human figure without details, but then I blinked and it was gone. I tried to tell myself it was just the light playing tricks again, but I felt uneasy. I checked behind the shelves. I walked back and forth. Nothing. Empty aisle, old books, silence. I moved on. That evening before I left I found one book that looked different. Its spine was thicker and its cover had no title. The leather surface was cracked and faded. I tried to open it, but the pages stuck together. I tugged gently and a few pages loosened. They were covered in tight handwriting that I struggled to read. It looked like old notes or a journal of some kind. The words were smudged. The smell coming from that book was worse than any other, like something rotten. I felt a heaviness in my stomach. My heart beat faster as I flipped another page. I had no reason to feel nervous, but I decided I needed more light and more time, so I put it aside for the next day. Before leaving I thought I saw that faceless figure at the end of the aisle again. It stood there tall and still. Then the lights flickered and it vanished. I ran my hand over my face. I was sweating. I left as fast as I could, without looking back. On the third day I felt more determined. I brought her there of strong coffee. The front door made the same noise. The hall was empty. The desk lamp was still on, though I had turned it off when I left. I remembered turning it off. I was sure of it. I looked around. Everything else was in place. I picked up the strange book from the previous day. I settled into a table under a lamp and tried to open it again. I got a better look at the handwriting. It listed names. Some were crossed out, others were circled. I saw no dates, no explanations, just a list of names, one after another. My heart beat faster. I did not know why. I felt tense. I sipped my coffee. It tasted bitter. I flipped deeper into the book. More pages stuck together. I pressed harder. Some pages ripped slightly at the edges. Then I found a page where most names were blotted out with ink, but one name was still visible, almost carved into the page. I tried to read it, but the letters did not form a word I recognized. As I stared, my heart pounded harder. I felt sweat under my shirt. I tried pronouncing it in my head, but the letters felt wrong. Suddenly I heard a scraping sound behind me. I turned fast. A chair had moved. I was sure it had been pushed in under the table. Now it stood a few inches away. There was no breeze, no one else here. I felt my legs shaking a bit. I walked around the table. I touched the chair. It felt cold. The whole place felt colder now. I rubbed my arms. I got back to the book and kept going. That same day I returned to the back room. I wanted to see if I could find more about that strange name in the back room. I searched the crates again. This time I heard breathing. It was slow and steady. It did not match my own breathing. I froze and listened. The sound came from behind a tall bookshelf. I tried to look between the cracks. I saw a space there too dark to make out details. My flashlight flickered. I tapped it. The breathing stopped. I stood still for at least a minute. Nothing moved. I heard only my own heart. I decided to leave. As I turned, I felt a pressure on my shoulders. My shoulders felt heavier, as if someone pushed down on them. I spun around, but there was no one. I breathed faster. The pressure faded. I told myself I was just tired and tense. I left the back room. Outside in the main hall, I flipped more pages of that book. I saw that same strange name repeated at the bottom of a page. The handwriting looked shaky, as if the writer had pressed too hard. When I focused on it, I felt a chill in my arms. I heard a soft creak behind me. I turned slowly. The figure stood there at the end of the aisle. It had no face, just a blank surface where a face should be. It wore a long coat or maybe a robe. I could not tell. The light was poor. I could not see eyes, nose, mouth, just a blank surface. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat. My hand shook. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. I took a step forward. The figure did not move. I blinked and it was gone. I paced around the library. I did not want to leave yet. I wanted to find out what was behind this strange feeling. I opened another book. This one had stories about local legends, mostly short entries about ghosts, strange lights in old buildings, rumors of hidden rooms. Nothing interesting, nothing about that name. My stomach growled. I realized I had not eaten. I drank some coffee, but it was cold and stale now. The taste made me gag. I put the thermos away and tried to refocus. I spent a few hours searching random shelves. The place was so quiet. My ears rang. Sometimes I thought I heard soft footsteps behind me, but I never saw anyone. Once I felt the hair on my arm stand up. A rush of cold air passed by, strong enough to move a few pages of an open book. I turned in circles trying to find a source of wind. There were no open windows, no open doors. The old lamp SED slightly. I tried not to panic, but I felt sweat on my back. My heart kept racing whenever I thought of that name in the book. I could not even say it in my mind. It felt wrong. At some point I found a note tucked inside a dictionary. It was a handwritten slip of paper with a warning: do not speak the name in the old book. Do not try to pronounce it. Leave this place. My heart skipped a beat. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to leave right then, but I felt drawn back to that table with the old book. I took the note and shoved it into my pocket. I walked slowly toward the table. I tried to keep my breathing steady. My legs felt weak and my shoulders felt heavy again. I rubbed them, but there was no relief. It felt like someone's hands pressing down. When I reached the table, the old book lay open on the same page. The name was there, dark and UN. I leaned down and looked closely at it. As I did, I felt a strange heat in my chest. My hands trembled. I touched the page gently. It felt damp, as if the page had absorbed sweat or moisture from the air. I tried to flip the page, but it stuck. I tugged harder. The page tore slightly, revealing something written on the back. I tried to read it, but the letters made no sense. I heard a faint scraping sound. I looked around. Nothing. The figure was not visible. I felt alone, but not comfortable. I felt watch. Time passed slowly. I noticed the lamps growing dimmer. I checked my watch, but it had stopped working. I tapped it. Still dead. I had no idea how long I had been there. I wanted to get out, but I also wanted an answer. I thought maybe if I wrote the name down separately and took it outside, I could research it. I pulled a small notebook from my bag. I tried to copy the letters of the name, but my hand shook too much. I wrote something down. but the letters looked distorted. As I tried again, I felt that same pressure on my shoulders. I stood up straight and looked around. Nothing there. I clenched my jaw. I tried to breathe slowly, but I was panting. I decided to just leave. I closed the old book. As I did, I heard a muffled sound like a distant moan. I looked in every direction. The library was empty. The desk lamp still glowed weakly. I started walking toward the door. My footsteps sounded loud. Halfway there, I saw movement at the end of an aisle. The figure stood there again, no face, just a blank oval. I stopped. My heart hammered. I gripped my bag tight. The figure stepped back, disappearing behind a shelf. I rushed forward, determined to confront it. I turned the corner, but there was no one. I found nothing but old books, a broom, and some empty crates. I scanned the floor, dust everywhere, no footprints. I backed away slowly, my head HD. I reached the door. I tried the handle, it stuck. I pulled harder, it felt jammed. My heart sped up again. I looked over my shoulder. The lamps flickered. I heard a whisper. It sounded like my own name, but I could not be sure. I yanked the door handle with more force. The door opened slowly. I stepped into the hall. The air outside the main room felt less heavy but still stale. I followed the corridor until I reached the exit. It opened without trouble. I went outside. It was late afternoon. I think the light was gray. The street was empty. I breathed in and out. Fresh air felt good on my face. My heart slowed down a bit. I walked a few blocks, then stopped at a bench. I sat there and tried to calm down. I opened my bag to check my notes. The slip of paper with the warning was there. The notebook page with the attempted copy of the name looked messy. The letters seemed to have changed shape. I could not explain it. My hands were still shaky. I realized I had left the old book inside. I wondered if I should go back and try again, but as I sat there I felt that same weight on my shoulders. Even in the open air, I looked around. Nobody was watching me. No figures, no faces, nothing strange, but the pressure was still there, light but noticeable. I closed my eyes and tried to relax. The pressure faded a bit. I stood up and walked around the block. I did not want to go back. I did not want to see that empty face again. I did not want to feel my heart race like that for no reason. My chest still felt tight. I rubbed my arms. The day felt colder now. I headed home, unsure what to do. With what I had found, I had no proof of anything strange, only my own memory and these notes. Over the next few days I stayed away from that library. I researched online, but I found no mention of the name. I had tried to copy. My notes were useless. The slip of paper with the warning made no sense. I could not explain what happened. I could not explain who or what I saw. I did not see any obvious trick or device that could have caused those sounds or that figure. I thought about going back with someone else, but I knew nobody who would agree to join me. That place was too isolated, too forgotten. Most people did not even know it existed. I tried to forget it, but at night I felt the same pressure on my shoulders. I heard small sounds in my apartment, as if someone moved a chair or flipped a page. I got up and checked. Nothing. I stood in my own hallway, in my own home, feeling tense and unsure. There were no answers. Maybe one day I will return, but not now. For now I keep quiet about what I saw. I try not to think about it too hard. I still feel my heartbeat beat fast, master, whenever I remember that old book and that strange name inside it. I never spoke it. I never will. I stepped onto my new property in the late afternoon. The sun was low and my boots stirred dust from the dry ground. I had signed the papers the week before. I hadn't spent much time out here, but I knew it came with a small house, a few outbuildings, and some fields that hadn't been worked in years. There was a strange stillness in the air that day, as if everything around me waited for something. The first thing that caught my eye was an old patch of boards lying flat near the orchard. They looked warped and discolored, out of place. I stood there watching them. I didn't know what was underneath. I was curious, and I felt the need to pull those boards away and see what was there. I first approached the boards with slow steps. They were damp in some spots, brittle in others. I could smell old wood and dirt. I crouched down and gripped one board at a time, pulling until the nails squeaked and popped loose. I set them aside. I uncovered a dark hole in the ground. It was a well. It had a round, crumbling stone lining and smelled of stale air. I leaned forward and looked inside. I couldn't see the bottom. It was dark. The sunlight didn't seem to penetrate more than a few inches. I tried to listen. I heard a faint dripping sound. It echoed deep below. My mouth felt dry. I swallowed and leaned closer, resting a hand on the rough stone. Then I heard it, a voice calling my name from inside the darkness. It was low, rough, and had a strange metallic tone to it. My name, spoken slowly as if testing it. I jerked back and stood up straight, breathing hard. I looked around. There was no one nearby. I was alone. The sound had definitely come from inside the well. I wiped sweat from my forehead. My heart was beating fast. I looked back down into the hole, but I couldn't see anything, just blackness. I cleared my throat and spoke my name out loud, repeating it as if to confirm what I had heard. Then the voice spoke again. It sounded closer this time, but still invisible. It asked me simple things. At first it said it knew who I was. It said it knew I had just taken possession of the property. It asked why I had decided to come out here alone. I just stood there. I didn't answer. I wanted to understand what was happening. I couldn't see a shape or a form down there, just darkness. My muscles felt tight. My shoulders hurt because I was tense. I moved back a few steps and picked up a flashlight from my tea-tool bag near the house's back porch. When I returned, the voice was silent. I knelt at the edge and shined the flashlight down. The beam stopped a short way in, swallowed by the darkness. I saw old stones in a damp interior surface. I heard water dripping. I smelled old moss and dirt, but I saw no movement, no figure. Then the voice spoke again, louder this time. It asked about my life. It asked what I feared most. It asked what failures I carried inside me. I gripped the flashlight and tried to keep my breathing steady. I could feel sweat under my arms. My stomach felt tight. I forced myself to speak. I said, "Who are you?" My voice came out weak. I cleared my throat and tried again, louder. I got no answer to that question. Instead, it asked me about a job I had lost years ago. It mentioned the year it happened and the reason I left that job. It said I hadn't told anyone the full truth. I felt lightheaded. I hadn't told anyone because I was ashamed. How did this voice know? I kept shining the light down, focusing on a patch of green algae on the stones. My hands felt shaky. I didn't understand what was happening. The voice had a dry, scraping quality to it, like metal tools dragged over stone. It never raised its pitch much. It just kept pushing at me, asking more questions. It listed events in my life. It said my name again. It asked if I was afraid. I stood up and backed away from the well. I looked around. I saw the orchard trees, old and twisted with brown leaves scattered on the ground. I saw the small farmhouse with chip paint. I saw the tools I had brought. I heard the wind pushing through dry grass. Everything looked normal except for this voice inside the well. There was no one out here with me. I didn't see any signs of a speaker or a device. I didn't see footprints other than my own. My heart kept pounding. I decided to speak again. I said I didn't know who it was or what it wanted. My voice came out flat and tense. The well's voice answered by saying it wanted to know why I had failed to keep certain promises I made long ago. It mentioned promises to myself, not to others. I felt a strange pain in my chest. I felt trapped. I tried to stay calm. I stepped forward again and leaned my upper body over the well, shining the flashlight in short, careful movements. I saw only the inside walls layered with dirt and mold. I tried to see if there were ledges or pipes. Maybe someone was down there. Hidden from view, I called out, asking them to show themselves. The voice didn't respond to that. Instead, it asked me about my fears again, repeating the question. It wanted details. It wanted me to admit what made me nervous and uneasy. I felt my throat tighten. I didn't want to answer. I waited, hoping it would stop, but it didn't. It asked about a time I had hesitated to do something important. It asked why I had backed away from opportunities. One didn't like these questions. They were personal. They came from a source I couldn't see. My breathing sounded loud in my ears. I stepped back and decided to do something more direct. I grabbed a long piece of wood and tapped it inside the well, trying to see if it would hit something. The wood knocked against stones. I lowered it until I felt resistance. There was water down there. I couldn't see it, but I felt the moisture on the tip. When I pulled it back up, the voice spoke again. It said my name and paused. It told me that it understood why I had hesitated in life, why I had stepped away from things that mattered. Hearing this made my neck tense. I asked how it knew these things. It didn't answer. I tried another tactic. I moved around the well, checking its outer structure. I looked for holes where someone could hide. I found none. The ground was firm. The stones looked old. I ran my hand along the surface, feeling small bits of moss and grit coming loose under my fingers. I could still hear my breathing, my own heartbeat, the quiet rustle of distant leaves. The voice just waited. It didn't seem in a hurry. I considered covering the well again. I picked up one of the boards and moved it near the opening. Then the voice spoke louder. It said not to close it. It said it still wanted to talk to me. I felt a sudden pressure in my chest. My legs felt weak. I tried to keep my hand steady. I asked it what it wanted from me. It said it wanted to know what I regretted most. I stood there, my back stiff, my jaw clenched. I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to talk to this thing. The silence stretched. I could hear my own pulse. My tongue felt dry. My stomach felt heavy. I lifted the flashlight and shined it around me, searching the ground, the trees, anything. I saw only my own property, no sign of anyone else. I knelt again at the edge of the well and peered inside. Nothing but blackness. I felt a strange pull. My legs trembled. I thought about lowering a rope and climbing down. I wanted to see what was in there. I wanted to understand this. My hand shook when I imagined going down. It didn't feel safe. The voice waited, silent and patient. I decided to go get a rope and a stronger flashlight from the house. I tried to act calm, walking away without rushing. The wind felt cold on my face. My skin tingled. Inside the small house, I found an old rope coiled in a corner. I tested its strength by pulling hard. It held. I took a larger flashlight, the kind with a stronger beam. I returned to the well. The boards were still off. I could see the open hole. I listened. There was no voice. I tied the rope to a nearby post and tested it. I shined the stronger flashlight down. I saw slimy stones, maybe a bit deeper this time, but still no bottom. The beam faded into darkness. I heard faint dripping sounds again. The smell of damp earth was strong. Then the voice returned. It said my name again. It wanted to know why I was interested in going down there. It said I had nothing to gain. I swallowed hard and said I wanted to see who I was talking to. It laughed. It was a short, rough sound. It wasn't loud, but it had a scraping quality that made my skin prickle. I asked what it was. It didn't answer that. Instead, it asked if I thought I deserved this property. It asked if I thought I had earned anything in life. It kept asking about my failures, never about my successes. It asked how I felt about leaving my old life behind. I clenched my jaw and ignored the questions. I tried to lower the flashlight on the rope, but as soon as I lowered it more than a couple of feet, I heard a scraping sound on the stone. I pulled it back up and saw fresh scratch marks on the flashlight's metal casing. My chest tightened. Something down there had touched the flashlight. I stepped back quickly, my legs Shaking, my heart thumped. I stared into that black gap. I felt sweat running down my back. I wiped my face. I didn't want to go down there anymore. Whatever was inside that well had touched my flashlight. It had reached out, or it had something inside that could scrape metal. I felt panic rising. I tried to stay calm. I tried to breathe slowly. I asked the voice what it wanted from me. It repeated its questions, my fears, my regrets, my failures. It wouldn't stop. I covered my ears, but that did nothing because the voice didn't sound like it traveled through normal space. It was there at the edge of my hearing. No matter how I covered my ears, I backed away step by step. The voice didn't get quieter. I moved farther, and still it spoke at the same volume. It said my name again and asked me what I was afraid of right now. My throat felt tight. I tried to speak, but only a croak came out. I forced words out. I said I didn't know what it was and I didn't like this. I said I wanted it to leave me alone. It didn't react. It just repeated my name. I walked farther away toward the orchard. The voice finally grew softer as I moved. When I reached the old trees, I could barely hear it. It was a low murmur, impossible to make out. My head felt light and my stomach felt unsettled. I stood there looking at my own house, my land, the dry grass, the sky. Everything looked normal, but I knew that hole was waiting for me behind the boards. I waited a few minutes. I caught my breath and calmed down a bit. Then I forced myself to go back. I approached the well slowly, gripping a hammer in one hand. I had no plan, but holding something heavy made me feel a little safer. The voice was silent as I approached. I looked down. Nothing. I decided to cover it again. I placed the boards back. One by one my hands trembled, but I kept working. I hammered some nails in, making sure the board stayed in place. I focused on the physical details, the sound of the hammer, the feeling of the nails resisting the rough surface of the boards. I tried not to think about what was inside. When I had it covered, I stood up and stepped back. I listened. No voice, just the sound of wind and my own breathing. My arms felt heavy, my back HD. I wiped sweat from my forehead. My eyes stung. I looked around at my property. It looked the same, but now I knew there was something under those boards, something that spoke and asked questions it shouldn't know to ask, something that scraped metal tools and made my skin crawl. I turned and walked toward the house. I decided I wouldn't remove those boards again. I didn't want to hear that voice. I didn't want to know how it knew my name or my past. I wanted to forget the sound of its rough metallic words. I felt uneasy, but I kept walking. The boards were in place. The well was sealed. I was done for the day inside the house. I locked the door. I set the flashlight on the table and looked at the scratch marks on it. They were shallow but clear. I remembered the scraping sound. I felt the muscles in my neck tighten. I knew I would have trouble sleeping that night. I had come here to start a new life, to have some peace, but now I had this memory stuck in my head. I leaned against the wall and listened to the silence, just my breath and the creaking boards under my feet. No voice. I told myself I would leave the well alone. I didn't care what it wanted. I didn't care what it knew. I wouldn't let it ask more questions. I wouldn't go near it again. I would work on other parts of the property, fix the fence, paint the house, clean the barn. I had no reason to return to that spot. As the evening light faded, I stood at the window and looked outside. I saw the orchard, the fields, the shape of the well's cover in the distance. It looked ordinary from here, nothing unusual. I kept my eyes on it for a long time. I listened for anything, but I heard nothing. Finally, I sat down at the old kitchen table and tried to relax. My body still felt tense, my head HD. I tried to think of something else, anything else, but I couldn't. My mind kept going back to that voice, the way it said my name, the way it asked me about my life. I stayed inside the rest of the night, keeping an eye on that window. I said nothing to anyone. There was no one to Till I just waited. I listened to the old house settling. I listened to the distant rustle of leaves outside. I kept imagining that voice, but it didn't return. Eventually I crawled into bed and closed my eyes. When I woke up, I decided I would leave the well sealed and ignore it. I had no other plan. I just wanted to live here quietly and not think about that hole in the ground. I placed the mirror in the corner of my living room around noon. I remember the time because I had just finished reorganizing some furniture and the sunlight was coming in through the window at a sharp angle. The mirror was old. Its wooden frame was dry and splintered in a few spots. It smelled slightly of dust and old fabric, like something that had been kept in a closet for a long time. I got it from a second-hand store 2 days before, thinking it might fill an empty corner. I thought it would make the room look bigger and brighter. I was wrong. Right after I set it down, I stood in front of it. The reflection showed me in the room. I could see the old couch, the coffee table, the rug, the door leading to the hallway. The reflection itself looked normal at first glance, but something felt off. I looked at my own face. I smiled at myself. I expected to see my smile reflected back. Instead, my reflection looked tense and serious. The eyes in the mirror did not narrow with a grin. They stayed calm and firm. I felt a strange pressure in my chest. I stopped smiling. I waited. I stared at myself again, this time with a neutral expression. Then the reflection's lips curled up slightly, like it was smiling at me, but in a quiet, controlled way. I raised my eyebrows. The reflection did not. I clenched my jaw. The reflection's jaw stayed relaxed. I felt my back tense. My arms felt stiff at my sides. I tried another expression, something simple. I lifted one corner of my mouth, expecting the reflection to do the same. Nothing. I took a step closer. My reflection did not take that step. It stayed where it was, as if the mirror was not reflecting my current position, but was stuck in some previous moment. I leaned in until my face was only a few inches from the glass. I could see small scratches on the mirror's surface. My eyes darted around, looking at my reflection's eyes. They were looking straight at me, matching my gaze. I noticed a faint flicker in the reflection's eyelid. I blinked. The reflection did not blink. I felt my stomach tighten. There was no reason for a reflection to behave like that. I reached out slowly and touched the mirror's surface with my index finger. The glass was cool and smooth. My reflection touched it too at the exact same time, fingertips aligning perfectly as if mocking me. But when I pulled my hand away, I noticed that my reflection's expression changed again on its own. It looked amused. I was not amused. I felt a dry swallow in my throat. I left the room and came back a few minutes later. I hoped that maybe my mind had played a trick on me. Sometimes the brain does strange things when you are tired or distracted, but when I entered the living room again, the reflection was still off. I stood perfectly still in front of the mirror. I did not move my face. The reflection's face changed slightly. The corners of its mouth turned down as if it was testing me, waiting to see if I would react. I raised my right hand suddenly to see if the reflection lagged. This time it raised its left hand, not its right, like it was a person on the other side, copying me with a delay and making small changes. I let out a sharp breath and felt sweat on the back of my neck. I tried speaking. I said something quiet, just testing. The reflection opened its mouth when I stopped speaking, as if it was going to say something, but I heard nothing. I placed my hand on my chest, feeling my heart rate increase. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I tried to ignore it for a while. I sat down on the couch position so I could still see the mirror from the side. I looked at it out of the corner of my eye. The reflection was still facing me. It should have shown me in profile from that angle, but it looked hidden, as if it had turned to face me. I stood up again and approached it. I lifted my arms and rotated my shoulders, seeing if the Reflection followed. It did not. The reflection remained still. After a moment the reflection lifted its own hand and pointed toward the wall behind me. I turned and saw nothing unusual. It was just a plain wall with white paint. I turned back to the mirror. The reflection repeated the gesture. It pointed to the same spot on the wall, a spot about shoulder height. It kept pointing, not moving, its face, eyes fixed on me. I went to the spot on the wall. I touched the paint. It felt normal. I tapped it with my fingernail. Solid drywall underneath. I looked back at the mirror. The reflection nodded slowly, then went still again. I turned back to the wall and pressed harder with my fingertip. After a few seconds I felt a slight unevenness in the paint. There was a tiny bump, like a small area where the paint had covered something beneath. I scraped it lightly with my nail. A bit of paint chipped off. I saw a faint line beneath, like something drawn on the wall before it was painted over. I decided to get a flathead screwdriver from a kitchen drawer. I came back and started to scratch the wall more thoroughly. Paint flakes fell onto the baseboard and floor. After a few minutes I exposed a small patch of strange symbols. They looked carved into the wall surface. They were not letters that I recognized. They were small sharp lines and curves arranged in rows. Some were connected by thin lines. I kept scraping, widening the area. The more I uncovered, the more complicated the patterns became. In some places I found shallow carvings of shapes that looked like twisted faces or bodies with too many limbs. My hand started to shake. I could hear my breathing becoming heavier. The screwdriver tip made a scratching noise that sounded too loud in the quiet room. I glanced at the mirror. The reflection was smiling broadly now. I did not feel good. I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling the damp of sweat. I tried to ignore my nervousness and continued scraping. I had exposed an area about the size of a small plate. The symbols and figures formed a dense cluster. I ran my fingertips over them. The carvings felt rough. I saw small chips of something embedded in the lines. They looked like bits of old plaster or maybe some kind of filler. The air in the room felt heavier than before. There was a faint smell like old soil or damp stone. I turned back to the mirror. The reflection was still smiling. I moved my mouth, asking silently what it wanted. The reflection raised both hands slowly, palms facing me as if telling me to stop. I stood up straight and took a step back from the wall. I looked at the symbols again. They made no sense to me. I heard a soft creaking sound. I thought it might be the mirror's frame settling. I waited. Then I saw the reflection move again. This time it moved one hand in a slow circle pointing at the symbols on the wall. It looked like it wanted me to do something else with them. Maybe it wanted me to remove more paint. Maybe it wanted me to try and open the wall. I felt a tightness in my gut. My throat felt dry. I did not like the idea of making a hole in my own wall, but I also did not like the idea of ignoring the mirror. There was something about its behavior that felt like a warning or an instruction. I walked to the kitchen again and got a small hammer and a chisel. My hands were shaking. I returned to the living room, stood in front of the wall, and placed the chisel's tip against one of the thicker carved lines. I tapped it lightly with the hammer. The plaster cracked. I chipped away a small chunk. Behind it I saw darker material, maybe older plaster or wood. I kept working carefully, trying not to cause too much damage. I felt sweat trickle down my temples. Every sound seemed loud: the tapping of the hammer, the crackling of plaster, my breathing. I glanced over my shoulder at the mirror. The reflection was watching closely, head tilted slightly. As I made a hole large enough to peer through, I noticed more symbols carved into something beneath the plaster layer. It looked like older wood paneling. I could see faint lines that might have been drawn or burned into the surface. I pressed my face close and tried to see inside the hole, shining a flashlight I took from a drawer earlier. The beam showed a gap behind the wall. The space inside looked empty, just a hollow area with bits of insulation and old wood beams, but on one beam I saw another set of these strange symbols scratched into the wood grain. They were smaller and fainter. My stomach clenched again. I turned back to the mirror. The reflection stared at me. I noticed my own face looked pale. The reflection, however, looked calm. I realized I had not seen the reflection display fear or confusion. It only displayed what seemed like deliberate expressions, as if controlled by someone else. I rubbed the side of my face with my hand. My jaw felt stiff. I tried speaking again, asking, "What do you want?" I said it out loud this time. The reflection did not speak. It pressed one finger to its lips as if telling me to be quiet. I shut my mouth. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I had no idea what these symbols meant. I felt a desire to cover them back up, to patch the wall and ignore this whole situation, but something about the reflection's insistence made me continue. I widened the hole in the wall and reached inside, feeling the rough surface of the wooden beam. My fingertips traced the carved lines. They were not smooth, they felt irregular, as if carved with a dull knife. I wondered who did this and why. I felt a slight vibration in my fingertips. It could have been my nerves. I pulled my hand out and flexed my fingers. They felt stiff. I turned back to the mirror and stood in front of it. I tried to match the reflection's expression. I kept my face neutral. The reflection frowned. I frowned. The reflection's frown deepened. I tried smiling. The reflection's face hardened. It seemed to resist any attempt to synchronize with me. I stepped closer until I could see every detail of my face in that old glass, my pores, my stubble, a small scar above my eyebrow. The reflection showed them all, but it moved when I did not. I lifted my left hand slowly. The reflection lifted its right hand, mirroring me, but reversed as if it were another person standing opposite me rather than a reflection. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing and watching. The smell in the room grew stronger. It smelled like old wet wood. I looked at the wall again. The hole I made exposed layers of material inside. I noticed some kind of old paint or stain on the inner beam. It was darker than the outer plaster. The symbols inside looked similar to the ones I had uncovered on the surface. I decided to take a photo with my phone. Maybe I could search for something similar online. I unlocked my phone, took a few photos and checked them. The images looked clear. The symbols were visible, sharp lines, some curved, some angled, arranged in strange patterns. I looked at the mirror as I put my phone away. The reflection held its hand out, palm up, fingers slightly curled. I had no idea what it wanted from me. I considered moving the mirror out of the house, maybe putting it outside or covering in it with a blanket, but I worried what might happen if I turned my back on it. I took a few steps toward it and reached for the frame. The wood felt rough and dry. I tried to tilt the mirror slightly to see if something behind it caused this. There was nothing behind it except the corner of the room. The reflection watched me, eyes tracking my every movement. I felt a sudden wave of fatigue. My shoulders HD. My legs felt heavy. I sat down on the floor, back against the couch, facing the mirror and the wall at an angle. I could still see the hole in the wall and the strange symbols. I listened. The house was quiet. I could hear a faint humming from the refrigerator in the kitchen. Outside, a car passed by. The reflection sat down too, but in a different position. It lowered itself slowly as if to maintain eye contact at all times. I rubbed my face with both hands, felt the sweat and the roughness of my unshaved cheeks. I breathed in and out, slow and steady. Then I stood up again. I approached the wall, looked through the hole and stared at the symbols. They were there, solid and real. I turned back to the mirror and watched the reflection. It nodded at me. I reached for the chisel and hammer again and chipped away a bit more plaster, enlarging the hole. My hand slipped at one point. and I scraped my knuckles against the wall, causing a brief sting. In a thin line of blood, I wiped it on my pants. The reflection watched. I saw a slight narrowing of its eyes as if it was interested in my reaction. I took a deep breath and shoved my hand deeper into the hole. I felt along the beam. There were more carvings extending up and down. I could not reach far enough to see them all. I pulled my hand out and wiped dust off my fingers. I checked the mirror again. The reflection tilted its head, then pointed to the symbols I had uncovered. I said, "I don't understand." My voice sounded small in the quiet room. The reflection opened its mouth slightly, then closed it. It pressed its palm flat against the glass on its side. I pressed my palm against the glass on my side. The surface felt cold. I pushed a bit. The mirror did not move. The reflection's eyes locked onto mine. I stepped away from the mirror and leaned against the wall near the hole. I could feel my heart beating. I thought about covering everything up, putting the mirror back in that second-hand store painting over the hole, but I also knew I could not pretend this never happened. The reflection acted like it wanted to guide me, to show me these symbols, but I had no clue what to do next. I stood there, shifting my weight from one foot to the other, picking paint flakes off my shirt. I watched the reflection carefully. It stayed in its position, looking straight at me. I could not hear anything unusual. I felt no sudden changes in temperature except for a slight coolness near the hole. I wondered if there was a draft coming from inside the wall. I reached in again, felt around for any gaps. I felt only wood and some old insulation. I pulled my hand out once more. The reflection made a small nodding motion as if acknowledging my attempt. I approached the mirror again. I stood directly in front of it and raised my hand slowly, aiming to move exactly as the reflection should. I lifted my hand, fingers spread. The reflection lifted its hand, fingers spread, but a second later and slightly off. We stood face to face. I watched its eyes. They seemed alert and aware, not glassy or dull. I lowered my hand. It lowered its hand. I raised my eyebrows. It kept its face neutral. I glanced at the hole in the wall behind me, the uncovered symbols, the strange figures, the rough carvings. I considered calling someone, but I felt uneasy about that idea. I did not want anyone to see me like this, nervous and confused. I also did not want to explain the mirror's strange behavior. I paced around the room a few times, checking the mirror occasionally. Each time I looked, the reflection's expression changed slightly. Sometimes it looked curious, other times it looked impatient. I tried to ignore my anxiety. I tried to focus on something normal, like rearranging the tools I had used, but nothing felt normal anymore. As evening approached, I noticed the light in the room changed. The reflection grew dimmer as the sun lowered outside. I turned on a floor lamp. Its light cast a bright spot on one side of the mirror's frame. The reflection seemed unaffected by the lighting. It maintained its odd behavior. I decided to pause any further exploration of the wall. I did not want to cause more damage or find something worse. For now, I just stood there watching the mirror, the reflection, and the symbols on the wall behind me, unsure what to do next, unsure why any of this was happening. I woke up around 2 in the morning because my throat felt dry. I got out of bed, rubbed my eyes, and walked down the short hallway to the bathroom. I just wanted a drink of water and maybe to splash some water on my face, but when I got to the bathroom door, I saw something strange. There were these wet footprints on the floor. They were small, like from a person with narrow feet, but I knew I hadn't walked through any water, and there was no reason for anyone else to be in my place. I stood there looking at them. They started in front of the sink and led toward the bathtub. The bathroom window was shut and the door was closed behind me. There was no trail coming in from outside or from the hallway. The footprints just started there right in front of the sink. I could see the faint reflection of the overhead light on the wet spots. I felt nervous right away. I took a few steps forward, careful not to step on them. I held my breath and listened. I didn't hear anything at first. The night was silent. The hallway behind me was dark. I leaned over, looked down at the footprints and noticed they ended at the edge of the bathtub. I expected to see something inside the tub, maybe water dripping, but it was dry. Nothing moved. I turned around, tried to see if maybe I had made them without noticing, but my feet were dry and I hadn't stepped in water. I felt a light sweat on the back of my neck. I got a cup of water from the sink, drank it fast and left. I went back to bed and tried to forget about it. The next night I woke up around the same time. My throat felt dry again. I don't usually get so thirsty at night, but I told myself it was just bad luck, or maybe I had too much salt at dinner. I walked to the bathroom and froze at the doorway. The footprints were there again, wet, shining under the dim bathroom light. This time they faced a different direction. They still started in front of the sink and ended near the bathtub, but their angle was different. It looked like whoever made them had turned slightly before stepping toward the tub again. I listened. This time I heard a very low sound. It was like a humming or a low singing coming from inside the bathroom, but I couldn't pin down the direction. I stood still and felt a chill on my back. It got colder and I felt my skin tighten. I felt my heart beat faster. I leaned closer to the sink, reached out and touched the porcelain surface. It was dry. I ran a finger over the tiles on the floor. They were dry except for the footprints. I tried to follow them more closely, but when I stepped toward the tub, the back of my neck felt colder and I got goosebumps on my arms. The sound got louder and my stomach tightened. I backed out and returned to my bedroom. I tried to sleep, but I kept thinking about those wet footprints. On the third night, I decided to be more careful. Before going to bed, I dried the bathroom floor with a towel. I made sure everything was clean and dry. I locked the windows and checked the entire apartment. I lived alone. No one had a spare key. I set my alarm for 1:30 in the morning so I could check the bathroom before I got thirsty. The alarm woke me up and I crept down the hallway without turning on any lights. I flicked on the bathroom light and saw the footprints again, wet and shining, standing out on the dry floor. I bent down and touched one with my fingertip. It was cold like water that had been sitting for a while. I rubbed my fingers together. I could feel moisture. I smelled my fingers. They smelled like plain water. No odor, no chemicals. Nothing strange. I touched my forearm and noticed my arm hairs were standing up. I listened and heard the low humming sound again, quieter this time but steady. It was a single tone, not a melody, just a quiet voice somewhere in the air. I leaned toward the bathtub. The humming got louder. My throat felt tight. I forced myself to reach over and open the shower curtain. The tub was empty and dry. I shined my phone's flashlight on every corner. Nothing moved. The footprints remained behind me, just sitting there. I turned back and noticed something else. There were fewer footprints than the night before, and they formed a slight curve. They weren't just random. They looked like they were bending around some invisible shape. Before ending at the tub, I swallowed hard, left the bathroom and stayed awake until sunrise, sitting in my living room thinking about what to do. On the fourth night, I tried to catch the source of these footprints. I stayed awake with all the lights off. I sat in my bedroom quietly, door half open, watching the hallway. I had turned off the bathroom light and kept the door open just a crack. Around 2 in the morning, I heard a light dripping sound. It sounded like water falling on tile. I waited a few minutes before I got up. I was sweating. My palms felt damp. I walked slowly into the hallway and peeked into the bathroom. The floor was wet in front of the sink again. The footprints visible even in the dark. I flipped the light on this time. I felt an immediate cold draft against my face. The humming sound was louder and had a slightly different pitch. I reached into the room, but the moment I stepped inside, I felt a strong shiver running up my spine. My breathing got shallow and my temples started to pulse. I tried to speak, but my mouth felt dry. I managed to say a few words quietly. Who's here? No response. The footprints just sat there, ending at the tub. I looked at the mirror. My face looked pale under the overhead light. I leaned over the sink and turned on the faucet. The water ran normally. I splashed some on my face, checked the hallway behind me, and turned back to the footprints. They hadn't changed. I touched the tub's edge, dry and cold. I grabbed a towel and tried to wipe the footprints off the floor. The towel absorbed the water easily and the footprints vanished. I stood there holding the damp towel, waiting. The humming stopped. I left the bathroom and sat on my bed in the dark until morning. Over the following nights I tried different things. One night I put a piece of cardboard on the bathroom floor. Another night I sprinkled a bit of flour. Another I placed a dry towel in front of the sink. Each time the result was the same. Around the early hours I would wake up thirsty, go to the bathroom and find wet footprints forming a pattern. The cardboard got soaked in two small spots shaped like feet. The flour got damp and clumped together. The towel ended up with wet marks in the shape of footprints. Every time they led from the front of the sink to the tub. They never passed through the door. They never came from the hallway. It was like they formed out of thin air. As the nights went on, I noticed the footprints changed direction slightly each time. Sometimes they angled left, sometimes right, sometimes they curved around and approached the tub from a different side. I wrote down the patterns, hoping to find some logic. I drew sketches of the bathroom floor and marked where I found each footprint. After a week I had several pages of notes. The patterns never repeated exactly. They formed shapes I couldn't recognize. I felt frustrated and tired. I started sleeping less. I woke up with headaches and muscle tension during the day. I tried to ignore it. I went to work, watched TV, ate meals, and pretended nothing was wrong. But at night I felt nervous before going to sleep. My throat kept getting dry at odd hours, forcing me to face those wet marks. I tried calling a friend, but I didn't know how to explain this without sounding strange. I said I was having weird plumbing issues, maybe a leak. My friend suggested checking the pipes or calling a plumber. I checked the pipes myself during the day. Everything was fine. The sink, the bathtub, and the toilet were all working normally. No leaks, no moisture collecting anywhere. I even inspected the ceiling and walls. Nothing. One night I decided to confront it again. I set an alarm for just before 2 in the morning. When it went off, I turned on every light in my apartment. I made sure the bathroom light was on and walked in with a camera on my phone ready to record video. At first the floor was dry. I stood there staring at the tiles, camera running. I stood for a long time. My legs got tired. I leaned against the sink and yawned right as I considered giving up. I heard a soft, low humming, the same sound I'd heard before. I pointed my camera at the floor. Nothing. Then I blinked and the footprints were just there, as if they appeared in one instant. Wet footprints, small and narrow, leading to the tub. My heart pounded. I recorded everything, breathing through my mouth because I felt my chest tighten. I reached out with my free hand and touched the air above the footprints, cold air like a draft. The humming got louder. I looked at the mirror, then at the ceiling. I saw nothing. I tried to speak again. Is someone here? My voice shook. No answer. The humming didn't stop. I could feel the hair on my arm standing up. I leaned forward, holding my phone low, Trying to capture every detail, the footprints glistened under the bright light. I stepped closer, felt that familiar chill up my spine, and stopped. I reached toward the tub. The moment I got close to it, the humming sound intensified. It made my ears ring a little. I stepped back and it faded. I approached again. It got stronger. I pointed the camera into the tub, dry and empty. I stuck my hand inside the tub and felt nothing but cold porcelain. My heart was racing, my breathing was fast. I pulled back and moved the camera around the bathroom, then down at my feet. My feet left no footprints, only those strange wet prints remained. I took a few steps back and left the bathroom, still recording. I went to the living room and sat down on the couch. I zoomed in on the video, playing it back. The footprints were clear. I paused the video several times, trying to see if something else was there. Just the prints in the tub. I turned the volume all the way up, listened to the humming on the recording. I could hear it, that low tone, but nothing else. I tried analyzing the pattern of footprints again. This time they formed almost a half circle before ending at the tub. Over the next few nights I kept recording and taking notes. The pattern changed each night. Sometimes the footprints formed a curve, sometimes a zigzag, sometimes almost a straight line. They always started at the sink and ended at the tub. They never crossed the doorway. They never extended beyond the tub. I tried touching the bathtub drain, checking if maybe it was damp or if moisture was creeping up from the pipes. Nothing made sense. The water in the sink worked fine, the drain was clean, and everything looked normal. By daylight I began to dread the nights I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, waiting for the alarm to ring, knowing I would find those footprints again. My hands would tremble as I reached for the bathroom light switch. My mouth would go dry even without me getting thirsty. My back would tense up and my shoulders would ache. I tried wearing heavier clothes, thinking maybe the chill was just my imagination, but I still felt cold whenever I got close to those footprints. After a while I stopped trying to talk to whatever was causing this. I realized it never responded. It never left anything but those footprints and the humming sound. It never appeared anywhere else in the apartment, only in the bathroom, only at that time of night. I tried staying out of the bathroom altogether, but my thirst would force me back. I tried ignoring the footprints and just getting water quickly. They would still be there no matter what. If I turned the light off and came back, they would appear again. If I left a towel on the floor, it would get wet. Footprints as well. No matter what I did, they always formed. They never vanished on their own. They stayed until I wiped them up, like a silent sign that something was there. As weeks passed, I noticed my nerves were wearing thin. I started leaving the bathroom light on overnight and kept the door open, hoping to see if anything came through the hallway. I never saw anything. I only ever saw the footprints when I stepped inside. They never formed while I watched closely. They only appeared when I looked away or led or stepped out for a moment. I tried to trick it by using a mirror to watch the floor while standing in the hallway. It didn't matter. The footprints would appear the moment my eyes weren't directly on the spot. It felt like something was messing with me, but I had no proof. Beyond the footprints themselves, I ended up with a pile of towels, all with damp spots shaped like feet. I ended up with hours of video footage where the footprints seemed to appear out of nowhere. The humming sound recorded over and over always sounded the same. I had no way to explain any of it. I never found a source. I never saw anyone, just those wet footprints on the floor, starting at the sink and ending at the tub, changing direction each night, forming patterns I couldn't understand and leaving me with a cold feeling in my bones that I couldn't shake off. I'm telling you all this because I don't know what else to do. I still live here. The footprints still appear. I still feel that chill Every time I enter the bathroom at night I still hear that low humming. When I get too close I don't know why it happens, I don't know what they mean, they never stop, they never explain themselves. I just keep wiping them away and hoping that one night they won't show up, but so far they always do. I walked into that old house expecting dust, creaky floors and a few loose door knobs. I did not expect the mirrored doors of a wooden wardrobe at the end of the upstairs hallway. The thing stood out against the peeling wallpaper and uneven floorboards. Its surface was clean, glossy, and darker than the rest of the room's furniture. The mirrored doors were clear, not cloudy like you'd expect in an old place. I remember walking past it and feeling a slight discomfort, like when someone stares at you from behind, but I ignored it. The first night I tried to settle in, just wanting to put my clothes away and get some sleep, but that wardrobe kept drawing my eyes. I'm a 38-year-old guy who wanted a fresh start. I had left a small apartment in the city for this old property in a quiet area. I had time off, I had money saved. This old house had good bones. I planned to fix it up myself. The first day was busy moving boxes, changing a few light bulbs, and trying to figure out which windows stuck. By night time I saw my shoulders hurt from lifting. My neck felt stiff. I just wanted to relax. I placed my bed in the main bedroom. There was an old bed frame there, and I put my mattress on it. The wardrobe stood close to the bed's foot, about 6 feet away facing me. I decided to leave it there for now. I turned off the overhead light and set a small lamp on the floor next to the bed. The room felt cool and a bit damp. I had no curtains on the windows yet, so moonlight came in. When I looked at the mirrored doors I saw my outline. I walked up to them and tapped the wooden frame. It felt solid. The hinges looked new. I opened it expecting old clothes or mothballs, but found nothing inside, just smooth wooden surfaces and a slightly musty smell. I closed it and watched my reflection. It showed me in my boxers and a t-shirt, tired eyes, messy hair. I turned off the lamp and lay down. I don't know how long I slept, but at some point I woke up needing water. The house was quiet. I could hear distant cars through the thin walls, but nothing else. I looked at the wardrobe. The moonlight gave the mirror a slight glow. I could see my reflection in it, but something seemed off. My reflection looked slow, like it was delayed. When I raised my hand, the reflection didn't raise it at the same time. There was a short pause, maybe a second or two, then it followed. I blinked hard. I thought I was half asleep. I got up carefully, my knees stiff. I took a few steps closer. The reflection moved later, not in sync. It was subtle, but I saw it when I leaned forward. The reflection leaned forward. After a gap of about 2 seconds I whispered something. I couldn't hear any difference in sound, but I felt uneasy. My heart rate picked up. I swallowed. My throat felt dry. I reached out and touched the mirrored surface. It felt cool and solid. My reflection touched it too, but again with that slight delay. The hair on my arm stood up. This wasn't normal. I stepped back. My reflection stepped back. Late I turned around quickly and looked back. The reflection turned more slowly. I suddenly noticed something strange. Behind my reflection was not just my room. The angle was off. The background looked like my room, but with differences. The wallpaper looked torn in places. The bed behind the reflection was the same shape as mine, but the sheets were darker and the mattress looked saggy. I stared at this detail. The reflection's room was similar but older, more run down, and the walls had stains I had not seen in my own room. I felt my legs tense. I took a deep breath. The air smelled stale. I leaned in again, trying to get a better look. I moved my head to the side. My reflection did the same, but late I saw a figure sitting on the bed behind my reflection. It was a man. He looked exactly like me. Same face, same hair, same body shape. He wore the same t-shirt and boxers. He sat there watching me. He didn't move in sync with me. He was separate. He raised his arm and pointed at the wall to the right side of the bed in his room. I could see the wallpaper there was peeled back, revealing some kind of dark patch. He pointed without expression. His eyes looked straight at me. My stomach tightened. I stepped back again, feeling cold sweat on my neck. I turned around and looked at my own wall. It was fine. The wallpaper in this room was old but not torn. There were no patches, there was just a faded pattern of leaves. I looked back at the mirror. The other man was still pointing. My reflection stood next to him, delayed, useless, like some kind of puppet. The other man in the reflection did not move except for his arm, which stayed pointing. I took a few slow steps back until I reached my bed. I sat down, not taking my eyes off that mirror. My heart was beating hard. I could hear my own breathing. I thought about leaving the room, but I stayed. I wanted to know what the hell was going on. I waited. After maybe a minute, the other man lowered his arm and stood up. He walked closer to the mirror from inside that twisted version of the room. I couldn't hear him, but I could see his footsteps shake the old floorboards in his world. He stopped close to the mirror and stared at me. I couldn't see any difference in his face except that he looked tired, his eyes slightly red. He reached out, touching his side of the mirror, palm flat, as if trying to push through. I stood up, my legs shaking. I felt lightheaded. I walked closer until I was about a foot from the mirror. The other man's eyes followed mine. He opened his mouth and moved his lips. I couldn't hear anything. I just saw his mouth forming words I couldn't understand. I reached out and tapped the mirror again 3 times. The sound was dull. The other man nodded slowly, then he pointed again at the wall. This time he stepped aside so I could see more clearly. In his room the wallpaper was torn away to reveal a small wooden panel with a metal latch. It looked like a hidden door or compartment. I looked at my own wall. It looked normal. I pressed my ear against it. The surface felt normal, no hollow sound. Just old plaster behind the wallpaper. I guess the other man stepped back and sat on his bed again, folding his arms. I backed away from the wardrobe and turned on the lamp. The warm light filled the room. I looked at the mirror again. The reflection now just looked normal, except my reflection was still delayed. The twisted room behind my reflection remained, and so did the other man, still sitting there. I rubbed my eyes, walked out into the hallway and flipped the switch for the overhead light. Bright light washed over everything. I came back in. The other room still showed in the mirror. The other man was still there. It didn't matter how much I blinked. It was not my imagination. I felt my throat go dry again. I needed water. I didn't want to leave the room because I thought something might change while I was gone, but I had to. I hurried downstairs, turned on the kitchen light, filled a glass at the sink and drank it in one go. I splashed water on my face, felt the cold sensation wake me up. My heart was still pounding. I hurried back up. Nothing had changed. The other man was still there. He looked patient. He just sat. I realized he was showing me something. I walked to the wall he had pointed at and examined the wallpaper carefully. At first I saw no difference. I ran my fingers along the edge where the wallpaper met the corner. I pressed lightly, feeling for a gap. My fingertips felt a slight crack in the plaster. I pulled at the wallpaper. It tore a little. I hesitated. The house was mine now. I could tear wallpaper if I wanted, but it felt strange. I looked at the mirror. The other man gave a single nod as if encouraging me. I used my fingernail to lift the corner of the wallpaper. It peeled slowly, making a soft ripping sound. Beneath it I saw old wood. It did not match the rest of the wall. There was a rectangular piece of wood about 2t wide and 1t tall fitted into the plaster. It had a small hole at one end, maybe for a handle. I tried to pull it. It was stuck. I looked back at the mirror. The other man stood up again, walked closer and tapped where his latch would be. I pressed where I thought A latch might be in my wall. I felt something move under my thumb. I pushed harder. I heard a soft click. The panel popped open slightly. I gripped its edge and pulled it out. Behind it was a shallow compartment. Inside I saw a small wooden box, dusty and plain. I pulled out the box. It wasn't heavy. I opened it. Inside were a few old papers and a large iron key. The papers looked like old property records, handwritten notes, and something that looked like a diagram of the house's layout. The handwriting was old-fashioned, a bit faded. I didn't care about that right now. I held the key in my hand. It felt cold and smooth. I looked at the mirror. The other man watched me carefully. He nodded once, then he stepped back, returned to his bed and sat down. He stared at me for a long moment. I waited, but he made no more gestures. I tried to say something, but he couldn't hear me and I couldn't hear him. I took the box and key and placed them on my bed. I examined them under the lamp. The papers mentioned a locked studio in the basement. They showed a sketch of the house with an extra space under the stairs that I hadn't noticed. The key probably opened it. I didn't know what I would find there, but the other man in the mirror had shown me this hidden compartment. Maybe he wanted me to find this stuff. I glanced back at the mirror. The reflection showed the twisted room still, but now I noticed that the other man's eyes looked less tense. He stood up and walked slowly to the mirror again. He lifted his hand and placed it flat against his side. I did the same. The glass felt cool. He leaned in as if checking my face closely. I saw details of his face, a small scar near his eyebrow, a faint stubble on his chin. He looked just like me, but tired. I didn't know how else to react. I stood there pressing my palm to the glass, feeling a strange numbness in my fingertips. After a few minutes the other man lowered his hand. He stepped back, turned around and walked to the door of his room. I hadn't noticed his door before. It was in the same place as my door, but his hallway looked darker. He paused at the threshold, looked back at me one more time and then left. I watched him go. He did not come back. I waited a bit longer, then turned off the lamp and tried to sleep. It was hard. My mind was full of questions. I stared at the ceiling, listening to my breathing, feeling my heart gradually slow down. Eventually I dozed off. In the morning I woke up with a stiff neck. I got up slowly, my muscles sore. I looked at the wardrobe. It reflected my room as it was. There was no delay in my reflection. I moved my arm up and down, perfect sync. My heart sank a bit, thinking maybe I'd imagined the whole thing, but I turned to the wall and saw the torn wallpaper. The hidden compartment was there. The box and key were on the bed, so it was real. I got dressed, pulled on jeans and a shirt and tied my shoes. I took the key and the box with me downstairs. I searched for a door under the staircase. I found a panel that didn't match the surrounding wall. I tried the key. It turned, scraping metal against metal. I opened it. Inside was a small studio, dusty and dark. I shined a flashlight inside. There were old tools, a metal trunk and a few wooden shelves. Everything smelled like old wood and iron. No one had been in there for a long time. I dragged out the trunk, opened it and found old letters, a broken lantern and a metal plate engraved with the house's original address. Nothing shocking, just old stuff. I brought it into the light and examined it piece by piece. The letters referred to repairs done decades ago, some unpaid bills, and a list of furniture that used to be in the house. The metal PL showed an old street number that had changed since. None of it answered my questions about the other man or the strange mirror. I stayed in the house for the rest of the day. I kept going back upstairs to check the wardrobe. It looked normal. I tapped the mirror. My reflection tapped back immediately. No delay. I moved side to side. Everything looked fine. I closed the wardrobe doors, reopened them. They still showed my roommate exactly as it was. I even touched the back of the wardrobe. Interior solid wood. At night I waited in bed with the lamp on, watching the Mirror. After a few hours my eyes grew heavy. Nothing happened. Eventually I turned off the lamp. The moment I did, the reflection seemed to lag again. Just for a split second I jumped out of bed and approached the mirror. My reflection was again slightly delayed. I sucked in a breath and waited. After a few seconds I saw the twisted room again. This time it was empty. The other man was not there. The bed was messed up, the torn wallpaper still visible. I leaned in looking for any sign of him. Nothing, just that empty room. I placed my hand on the glass. No response. I waited. I felt a slight coolness, a mild vibration, or maybe just my own pulse in my hand. I stood there for a long time, but the other man did not return. Eventually I turned on the lamp again. The twisted room disappeared. My reflection returned to normal. Over the next few days I focused on repairing parts of the house. I cleaned the storeroom, organized the old papers, and decided to keep the key in the box safe in a drawer. I checked the wardrobe every night. Sometimes after I turned off the light I would see that other room. Sometimes I would catch a glimpse of the other man, just a short glimpse of him stepping out of sight. He never pointed at anything again. He never tried to speak. He was just there, moving quietly in that strange version of my bedroom. I never found out exactly what he wanted. Maybe he just wanted me to find that hidden compartment. Maybe he wanted to show me the old storeroom. Maybe he needed me to discover something that was hidden for years. I don't know. I kept living in that house. I replaced wallpaper, fixed the floors, and got some furniture that matched my taste. The wardrobe stayed in the same place. I did not remove it. I let it be. At night I sometimes turned off all the lights and watched the mirror. Sometimes the other man appeared, but he never tried to communicate again. He just stood there or sat on the bed or walked around the room. Sometimes he left and didn't come back for days. I learned to accept it. The mirror showed me something that first night, something I never imagined was possible. I got used to it. Over time the fear turned into a kind of tense curiosity. I slept better once I understood that nothing bad happened. The other man never threatened me. He never tried to harm me. He only pointed at that wall and showed me something hidden. After that it was just quiet visits and long silences. I live here now. The old house is my home. I have the wardrobe with the mirrored doors. I have the memory of that first night, and every so often I turn off the lamp, look into the mirror, and see him there watching me from that other room, moving a bit slower than I do, as if time works differently for him. He never smiles, never frowns. He's just there, and I stand on my side, feeling my heart beat in my chest, wondering what he's doing and waiting for the day he might point to something else, but he doesn't. He just stays, and so do I. I got the letter on a Thursday afternoon. It arrived in a plain white envelope with my address on the front and no return address. I remember feeling a slight discomfort as I opened it, expecting at least a company logo or some printed advertisement. Instead I found a single sheet of paper, completely blank. I held it up to the light, felt its texture, and examined its edges, but saw nothing. At first I thought it was some dumb prank. I tossed the envelope aside and placed the paper on my kitchen table. Annoyed but not concerned, I went about my day without thinking much about it. That evening, as I was sitting in the dim light of my living room, I noticed the envelope and the paper still on the table. I had a small candle lit nearby because the overhead light in that room tends to flicker. I don't know why, but I picked up the blank sheet and held it near the candle just out of curiosity. The heat of the flame made my fingertips warm. As I brought the paper closer, something appeared on its surface. Black letters formed slowly as if drawn by an invisible hand. I leaned in, trying to read them. I saw the start of a sentence, but as I tried to focus, the words faded. I tried again, holding the page closer to the flame, tilting it slightly. For a second I saw clear black Letters. I made out a few words, something about watching and you, but then the letters vanished. I felt a strange rush in my chest, like a mild panic. I set the paper down and blew out the candle, my heart beating fast. I spent the rest of that night wondering what I had just seen there. There were no obvious marks on the paper in regular light. I tried holding it under a lamp, even in front of my bathroom mirror, but nothing came up. Only near the candle flame had those letters appeared. I kept thinking about it, unable to relax. I had a late dinner and tried to watch some TV, but after a while I returned to the table. I lit the candle again and tried once more to see the words. This time I noticed a faint outline of letters forming. I leaned in, holding my breath. The letters turned dark. For a split second I saw something like "do not," and then they disappeared again. My neck was tense and I felt a kind of stiffness in my jaw. I tried a third time, bringing the paper so close to the flame that I worried I might scorch it, but still the letters refused to stay. I kept seeing fragments. "Do not, I am you." They would appear in bursts and then fade. My shoulders grew tight and I could feel my legs trembling. I gave up for the night. The next day I tried to forget about it. I went to work, returned home, made myself a simple meal and pretended the letter did not matter, but I was lying to myself deep down. I needed to know what the hidden word said. That night I sat down at my kitchen table with the candle again. I waited until it was completely dark outside. I turned off every light in the house except for the candle's flame. The room was quiet. I could hear my own breathing. I held the paper in front of the flame and watched carefully. The letters appeared and disappeared too fast. I tried moving the paper very slowly, changing angles, trying to catch the full sentence. The paper seemed to grow warmer in my hand and a chill ran down my spine each time the letters formed and vanished. My fingers were getting sweaty and I wiped my hand on my pants as I tried to. Again and again I began to hear soft sounds around me. At first I tried to act tough. I stood up, walked around the room, searched behind the curtains, checked the locks on the windows. Nothing. The whispering never ended, but it never got louder enough for me to identify words. After an hour or so I gave up. I blew out the candle and went to bed, trying not to think about it. I did not sleep well. I woke up many times that night, sweating and breathing heavily. On the third night I decided to record what was happening. I put my phone on the table, opened a voice recording app and started filming with its camera as well. I placed the candle in the center of the table and sat down. I tried to keep my hand steady. The paper looked so ordinary under the candlelight. I held it up once again and watched as the letters flickered into view. I saw a phrase, "Do not ignore this warning." I tried to hold the paper still and I read a bit more, "I am watching you," and then it vanished again. I exhaled sharply and the whispering started again, this time closer, right behind my chair. I whipped my head around. Saw nothing. I listened to my phone's microphone hiss quietly. I wanted to see if it picked up anything. I tried one more time with the paper. This time I got a longer glimpse. "Do not ignore this warning. I am watching you. Do not try to run. I know where you are." My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I felt sweat running down my back. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the paper. The voices got louder. I could hear them circling around me. I felt something brush against my arm, but when I looked, nothing was there. I snuffed out the candle and turned on the kitchen light. The whispering stopped at once. The room looked normal again. I checked my phone. The recording showed me sitting there holding the paper, but there were no visible letters on the screen. The microphone only picked up my own breathing in the faint crackle of the candle flame. No whispers, no strange noises. I felt frustrated and uneasy. I knew what I heard, what I saw. I could not have imagined it. My pulse was still racing and my stomach felt cramped. My legs were weak when I stood Up I paced around the house, checking rooms, opening closets, looking behind doors, convinced someone had to be there. I found no one. The place was quiet and empty. The next night I tried another approach. I placed 3 candles on the table, hoping to get more light and a clearer view of the letter. I waited until midnight, when everything was silent. I turned off all other lights. The 3 flames danced a bit, creating shifting shadows on the walls. I held the paper up once more. The letters appeared and vanished quicker than before. I tried to read them out loud as they formed, hoping that might help me remember or force them to stay. I said, "Do not ignore this warning. I am watching you. Do not try to run. I know where you are. I know what you." And the letters disappeared again. As I spoke, I could feel the temperature in the room drop. My breath came out in short gasps. My neck was stiff. The whispering started again, louder than the night before, and I could hear distinct words. This time someone said, "Listen." Another voice said, "Stay still." I felt a presence behind me, like warm breath on the back of my neck. I jerked my head around. Nothing. I could not see anyone, but I smelled something stale and musty, like old sweat. I tried to keep reading the paper. The letters were gone. The page was blank again. I set the paper down. The whispering did not stop. I tried to say something to these unseen voices. "What do you want?" I said. My voice came out hoarse. The candles flickered wildly, almost going out. The whispering intensified. My hands were clammy and my stomach churned. I could feel my body shaking. I stood up, and as I did, I felt something tug at my shirt. I jumped back, almost knocked the table over. The candles wobbled but did not fall. I shouted, "Stop it!" The whispering grew quieter, then faded away, leaving me alone with my own heavy breathing. I turned on the kitchen light again. The normal light made the room feel small and empty. The silence weighed on me, and I felt dizzy. I did not sleep that night. I sat on my couch, keeping all the lights on. I stared at the letter which I had placed on the coffee table. It looked so plain, a simple white sheet of paper. I wondered if I should just throw it away, but I could not bring myself to do it. I did not know why. Maybe I thought I needed to solve this mystery. Maybe I was afraid that throwing it away would make things worse. I stayed awake, watching the paper, my heart racing every time I thought I heard a creak in the walls or a tap on the floor. The following night I tried a different candle. I took a scented candle from my bathroom, something with a faint vanilla smell. I thought maybe the type of candle mattered. I placed it on the table and lit it. The flame was smaller and steadier. I held the paper up. The letters appeared briefly. I caught only a few words. "Do not ignore. I watch. You cannot hide. You cannot." Then they vanished. The whispering started, but softer this time. I heard a gentle hiss near my ear, like someone trying to speak with their mouth closed. My chest felt tight, and I could not take a full breath. I tried to force myself to speak calmly. "I'm here," I said. "I see your message. What do you want me to do?" Silence, then a faint whisper, "Obey." My spine tingled and my eyes watered. I tried to stay steady. I could feel sweat on my face sliding down my cheek. I blinked hard and wiped it away with the back of my hand. I tried to keep the paper near the flame for a longer time, moving it slowly, hoping to make sense of the full message each time I did. The letters popped in and out, always threatening, always incomplete. "Do not ignore. I know you will." Then gone. The whispering seemed to respond to my frustration every time I failed to read the full message. The voices got louder, more scattered, surrounding me from all sides. I felt trapped. My throat was dry. My hands shook so much that at one point I almost dropped the paper into the flame. I managed to pull it away in time. I noticed that the whispering always started right after I read a few words. It was like some force did not want me to know too much, or maybe it wanted to scare me into understanding something I could not grasp. I tried a different tactic. I stood up, lit the candle, held the paper from a distance, then slowly brought it closer just enough to make the letters appear. The moment I saw them, I tried to back away before they disappeared, but it made no difference. They vanished anyway. I slammed my fist on the table, frustrated. The whispering grew louder again. I clenched my teeth and resisted the urge to shout. My body felt sore and my neck was stiff from tension. My heart pounded so hard it made my chest ache. After several nights of this, I stopped bothering to record or try different methods. I stuck to the candle and the paper, forcing myself to face whatever was happening each night. I approached the paper the same way each night. The letter teased me with threats and warnings each night. The whispering voices surrounded me, making the air thick and hard to breathe. I was tired. My eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. My hands trembled constantly. Even during the day, I ate less and I felt on edge all the time. I jumped at every noise outside. I checked my door locks 3 or 4 times before lying down at night. Even when I tried to sleep, I felt as if someone stood at the foot of my bed staring at me, breathing quietly. I never got a full sentence. I never learned exactly what the message said or who sent it. I only got pieces. Do not ignore this warning. I am watching you. Do not try to run. I know where you are. I know what you do. You cannot escape. Obey. That was the gist of it. Every attempt left me tense and shaking. The whispering did not stop. It followed me every time I lit that candle and tried to read. After a while, I realized that I could not get more information. I was stuck with this puzzle that only brought me fear and exhaustion. On the last night I tried, I told myself that I would give it one final shot. I sat down in the dark with the candle, held the paper up and read the few words I could. As expected, they vanished too soon. The whispering started up, swirling around me, making my skin crawl. My muscles were tight and my breathing came in short bursts. I felt my heart hammering in my chest. I could hear my pulse in my ears. The voices got louder and I shouted, "I've had enough, stop." They did not listen. I grabbed the letter, folded it up and shoved it back into the envelope. I left the candle burning and stormed out of the room. The whispering faded as soon as I left, like I had escaped a small pocket of reality that existed only at that table with that candle and that piece of paper. I locked the letter inside a drawer. I still hear faint whispers sometimes when I stand too close to that drawer at night with the lights off, but I do not open it anymore. I keep the lights on and avoid using that candle. I try to ignore the tension that lingers in my house. I do not know who sent that letter or why. I have no answers. I just know that every attempt to read it, every time I tried to understand, brought more fear, more whispered threats, and no relief. Now I do my best to live with the uncertainty. It is better than the alternative, standing there in the dark, sweating and shaking, listening to those voices I can't see. I may never know what was written in full, and I may never get rid of that letter, but I will not go near it with a candle again. That's the only choice I have if I want to keep my sanity. I remember standing in my living room at around midnight. The lights were dim because I had switched off most of them to relax before heading to bed. The neighborhood was quiet outside. I could not hear any traffic or voices. It was the kind of silence I usually found comforting, but that night something felt off. I noticed a dull, repetitive sound coming from above. It was a muffled bump or scrape repeating every few seconds. It came from the ceiling, from somewhere I had never gone before, probably the attic. I had not thought about that attic in years. I never used it. The hatch was at the end of the hallway above a step ladder that I kept folded against the wall. The idea of going up there felt strange. I had no reason to go before, and I had always assumed it was empty or filled with dust, but the sound did not stop. At first I tried to ignore it. I leaned against the armrest of the couch and waited, thinking it might be pipe unsettling, or an animal walking around, but the noise had a rhythm. It was not random, it was consistent. Every few seconds something tapped, scraped, then went quiet. After about 5 minutes I could not let it go. I turned on the hallway light and looked up at the small attic hatch. I had to stand on a stool to reach it. I placed the stool directly underneath and tried to push the hatch open. It was stiff and covered in a thin layer of paint that stuck around the edges. After a hard push, the wooden panel lifted. A musty smell came down at me. It was dry, stale air that made my eyes water a little. I coughed and wiped my face with the back of my hand. I considered grabbing a flashlight. I walked back to my closet and took out a small LED flashlight that I kept for power outages. It had fresh batteries, so I turned it on to make sure it was bright enough. The light was clear and strong. I grabbed a dust mask from the kitchen drawer because the smell had made me cough. I pulled on an old jacket and some gloves because I did not know what I would find up there. Then I returned to the hatch, climbed the stool and stuck my head inside. The flashlight beam cut across a wide open space. It was larger than I expected. The attic was not just a cramped storage area, it had a surprising amount of room. The floorboards looked old with some gaps and cracks. There were no boxes, at least not in front of me. I pulled myself up and stood carefully, making sure the boards could hold my weight. I swept the beam of the flashlight around. I saw shelves against the walls. They were old wooden shelves, all empty. Not a single item sat on them. The wood looked worn and pale, as if something had scraped against it over a long time. In one corner I spotted masks. They were lined up on the floor, leaning against the wall. Each mask looked handmade, but they had no eye holes. There were 3 of them. They were wooden with simple carvings around where the eyes should be and small slits for mouths. The texture looked rough. The faces looked blank because of the missing eyes. I stepped closer to them, shining the light to see if there was any detail. They smelled like old wood and dust. The attic had no windows. The only light I had was my flashlight and a strange glow that seemed to come from nowhere. I noticed something odd. The air looked slightly brighter near the center of the attic, as if the moonlight somehow leaked in through cracks that did not exist. I pointed the flashlight at the ceiling. It had no vents or skylights. It was solid wood, yet I could see faint silvery light across some sections of the floor. It did not make sense. The house was old, and I knew that the roof was intact. The moonlight outside would not come in, but there it was, a faint light that allowed me to see some details without relying entirely on the flashlight. The sound had stopped. I listened carefully. The tapping was gone, replaced by a soft rustling sound. It sounded like fabric being dragged across the floor. Then I heard whispering. It came from behind one of the shelves. I could not make out words at first. I moved slowly, trying not to make noise with my shoes. As I got closer, I heard voices. They were low mumble, and they sounded like multiple people talking at once. Some words were too quick to understand, but I caught my name. They were talking about me. I froze. My heart thumped and my palms started sweating. Inside the gloves, I tried to shine the light where the voices came from, but there was no one there. The shelf was empty. The wall was bare. The whispering continued. They said my name again in different tones. I heard one voice deeper than the others say it slowly and with care. Another voice repeated it faster and more urgent. I did not know what to say. I stayed quiet. I did not see anything moving in that spot, but I felt something. The air changed pressure. It felt heavier. My breathing grew shallow. I wanted to leave, but I also wanted to know what was happening. I took a step back. The floor creaked under me. The whispering stopped for a moment, then it resumed louder. Now I could understand a few more words. They were arguing. One voice told the others to stay quiet. Another voice said that I was here, that I had come up. I tried to find the source by walking around the attic. I kept my flashlight aimed ahead. My steps were careful. I leaned forward and looked behind the shelves. There were no cables, no vents, no hidden speakers, just dusty corners and empty spaces. I turned toward the masks again. Something had changed. They were not in the exact same position as before. I remembered their arrangement. The three masks had been side by side, all facing forward. Now the middle one faced slightly to the right. I knelt down, shining the flashlight on it. I reached out and touched it. The wood was cool and dry. I tried to see if maybe a breeze had moved it, but there was no breeze. The air was still except for the feeling that it might be breathing. I mean that in a literal way. The floorboards seemed to shift slightly, as if something underneath them expanded and contracted. I felt a vibration under my boots. I steadied myself. I pressed my hand against the floor. It felt solid, but there was a subtle movement, like a gentle rise and fall. It made me uneasy. I did not want to think about what could cause that. Then I heard another sound, a scraping noise behind me. I spun around, holding the flashlight in front of me like a weapon. In one corner of the attic, crouched low near the floor, I saw a shape. It was a form darker than the rest of the space, hunched over as if hiding. It did not move. I tried to see details, but I could not. It looked like a person or something shaped like a person. It was silent and still. I thought about saying something. My throat felt tight. Before I could speak, I heard more whispering from another corner. I turned and saw another shape, also crouched. Now I realized there were several of these shapes in different corners. They stayed low, pressed into the corners where the walls met. Their forms were blurry in the strange light. I counted at least 3, maybe 4. None of them moved closer. They just stayed there. The whispering rose and fell. The voices said my name again. I asked, "Who are you?" My voice sounded too loud in that quiet space. The whispering continued. None of the shapes responded directly. They just kept talking among themselves. Their voices were human-like, but I could not see faces. I could not see eyes or mouths. I thought about leaving. I took a step toward the hatch, but when I looked back at where I had come from, I could not see the opening. The hatch should have been near the place I climbed up. I moved the flashlight beam along the ceiling and the floor, but the hatch was gone. I felt panic rising. My breathing got faster. My heart pounded. I felt the sweat on my forehead and in the small of my back. I told myself to calm down. I walked back to the shelves, trying to retrace my steps. The attic floorboards creaked with every move. I checked the walls carefully. I found the place where I took a deep breath and tried to think about a way out. I stood up straight and walked in a circle, shining the flashlight on every surface. The attic looked the same in every direction. The shelves were empty, the masks were on the floor, and the corners were dark. The whispering went on. Sometimes it sounded like multiple voices overlapping. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned there was nothing. I tried to find a wall that might give way. I pushed against one of the shelves. It creaked but did not move. I bent down and tried to lift a floorboard. It would not budge. I knocked on the walls and listened. The whispering got louder as I did that, like they did not want me to disturb anything. After a few minutes I noticed a subtle movement in the ceiling above. The ceiling board seemed to shift slightly, forming a small gap. A faint beam of moonlight shone through. I stared at that beam of light, trying to figure out where it came from. If I followed it, maybe I could find a clue. I moved underneath it. I looked up. There was no hatch, no window, but I could see that the ceiling looked thinner there. I reached up with one hand and pressed against it. The wood felt pliable, as if it could bend. I pushed harder. I heard a crack and the whispering grew more agitated. The voices sounded upset. They said my name again, louder. I pushed again, Harder this time, the wood splintered a bit, dust rained down on me. I coughed and shielded my eyes with my arm. I did not want to stop, I wanted out. My arms trembled, but I kept pushing and picking at the crack, trying to widen it. The whispering turned into a kind of hushed hiss. I heard some of the shapes skitter across the floor behind me. I did not look back. I shoved the flashlight in my mouth, holding it between my teeth, and used both hands to pull and push at the boards. My fingertips hurt from pressing against the rough edges. Eventually I pried one small board loose. A thin rush of cooler air came through. I could smell the outside air, fresh and slightly damp. I kept pulling at the ceiling. I did not care if it damaged anything. I just wanted an opening. I got another board loose and more dust fell. I spat out the flashlight, holding it in my hand again. I could see a small opening now. It led to darkness, but it felt different from the attic darkness. I reached up, grabbed the edge and hauled myself up. The whispering voices hissed again and then fell silent. As I pulled my torso through the gap, I felt something brush against my leg. I kicked blindly. My foot connected with nothing but air. I wiggled through the gap. I did not know where I was going. I just knew it could not be worse than staying down there. The space above the attic ceiling was cramped. I had to crawl. I shone the flashlight around. It was like a narrow crawl space with insulation and wooden beams. I recognized normal house construction. This looked right. I moved along the beams, careful not to put a knee through the drywall. After a few feet I saw another opening. It led down into a closet in my house. I recognized the top shelf of my bedroom closet. I pulled myself toward it, lowered my legs carefully and climbed down. My knees hit familiar carpet. I smelled my laundry detergent from the clothes on the shelf. I turned around and looked up. The gap I had come through was just a loose board in the closet ceiling. I did not see the attic I had left. It was just a normal space. I reached up and felt the boards. They were solid, nailed in place. No opening, no mysterious room. I took a minute to catch my breath. My heart was still pounding. My clothes were covered in dust. My hand shook. I turned off the flashlight and listened. The house was quiet. The refrigerator hummed softly. I could hear the faint tick of the clock in the hallway. There was no whispering. I stood up, walked out of the closet and checked the hallway. The attic hatch was closed as it always was. I touched the hatch. It felt normal, just a stiff piece of wood. I stood there for a while, breathing slowly, feeling my heart rate return to normal. I did not know what I had just experienced. I looked at my gloves. They were dusty. I smelled the stale scent from them. I walked to the bathroom and washed my hands. The gloves left a thin layer of dirt in the sink. I rinsed it away, dried my hands, and returned to the hallway. Everything looked normal. I turned on more lights, checking each room. Nothing was out of place. I never heard that noise again. The attic remained sealed, and I never attempted to open it. I spent the rest of that night awake, sitting in the living room with every light on, listening carefully. I heard no voices. I heard no shapes moving around. The house felt like my house again, but I remembered everything. I saw the empty shelves, the masks with no eyes, the whispering voices saying my name, and those shapes in the corners. I remember how I felt, my heart pounding, how I sweat, how my muscles tensed, and how my breath caught in my throat. When I realized I could not find the hatch, I remember how real it all felt. That is all I can say about it. I did not find answers. I just know I went up there and I came back down. Nothing else happened afterward. The attic stayed quiet and I never went back. I keep telling myself it was some kind of mistake or maybe a half dream, but I know how real it was. It is something that will stay with me every time I look up at that ceiling. I got home late that night. I was tired and my legs hurt from walking around all day. I opened the front door slowly, stepped inside and shut it behind me. The apartment was quiet there. was no light except for the glow from the street lamp outside slipping in through the thin curtains in the living room. I placed my keys on the small table near the door and took off my jacket. My shoulders felt stiff and I wanted to sit down, maybe watch some TV, maybe drink a glass of water. I took a few steps toward the couch and then I heard it. The telephone on the side table in the living room was ringing. I stopped, my heart rate jumped. It was the old landline phone that I never used anymore. I had a cell phone for everything. I had not bothered to keep the landline connected, or so I thought. I remembered that I never plugged the phone cable back into the wall after I moved some furniture. A few weeks ago, I even remembered seeing the loose cord hanging from the back of the phone. I walked closer, squinting in the dark. The phone was there, black and dusty with no cable attached, but the ringer was loud, sharp and real. It vibrated, ate the table a bit. I stared for a second, feeling a heavy pressure in my chest. I reached out, picked up the receiver and put it to my ear. I heard breathing, slow and uneven. A man's voice, low and rough, began to speak. It sounded strange, as if he had a sore throat. He said he knew what I wore that day. He listed the clothes, each piece in the right order with the same colors and details. He said he saw me at the coffee shop, described the table where I sat, mentioned the newspaper. I picked up the coins I left on the counter. He said he knew I bought groceries, said exactly which items I placed in my basket at the store. He said he knew I brushed my hand against the railing outside my building's entrance before I went out in the morning, that I touched the doorknob on my apartment door 3 times while checking if it was locked. I stood there pressing the receiver to my ear with sweaty fingers, not saying anything. I listened as this voice described everything I did that day. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. My throat felt dry. I looked at the telephone base. The cord was still unplugged. I wanted to speak, but I did not know what to say. My mind was empty and my hands trembled. Then the voice said that it knew my secrets, and it laughed in a slow, low way that made my stomach tighten. Before I could ask anything, the voice stopped speaking. The line went silent. I pulled the receiver away and listened. Nothing, just dead silence. I placed it back down. I stood there for maybe a full minute, staring at the phone, feeling the tension in my legs and my neck. I turned on the lamp and checked the phone. The cable was not connected to the wall. I unplugged the power cord from the outlet and stared at it. The phone had no reason to ring. I checked my cell phone, no missed calls. I looked out the window. The street was empty, no cars, no one at the door. I tried to calm down by walking around the living room. My heart was still beating too fast. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed a glass, filled it with tap water and drank it. I stood by the sink listening to my own breathing. There was no sound from the living room. Now the apartment felt too quiet and empty. I tried to tell myself that maybe I was too tired. Maybe I imagined something, but I knew I heard the ring. I felt it under my fingertips when I picked up the receiver. The voice was real. The details he mentioned were real. There was no way I imagined those details. I placed the glass down. I went to the phone again and tried pressing some buttons. It did nothing. The line was dead. I dropped onto the couch and stared at the ceiling. I did not sleep well that night. I kept waking up, checking the time on my phone, sitting up, looking at the telephone on the side table. It never rang again that night. In the morning I felt stiff and tired. I got dressed, slowly looking at the phone every now and then. It was still there, silent and useless. I considered throwing it out. I picked it up, checked the back of it. There was dust around the base and no batteries inside. It had no way to function without the cable. I took it to a drawer in my bedroom and locked it inside. I thought maybe I would get rid of it later. I went on with my day. I showered, got dressed and left for work. I tried not to think about the voice, but it stayed in the back of my mind. I tried to focus on my job, but I kept remembering how the voice knew every little detail. I wondered if I was being followed. I looked over my shoulder a few times when I walked outside. I scanned the faces in the crowd. I checked reflections in the store windows. Nothing seemed unusual at work. I sat at my desk, tried to do what I always do, but I could not focus. My hands were shaking a bit. I told a coworker I didn't sleep well. I said I had a weird night, that's all. I did not mention the phone call. I did not want to sound strange. I ate my lunch in silence and checked my phone constantly. Nothing happened. When I left work, I walked home a bit faster than usual. I kept looking around, trying to see if someone was watching me. I went into my building, up the stairs, and got to my door. I paused before unlocking it. I listened. Nothing inside. I stepped in. I did the same routine, put my keys on the table, took off my jacket, sat on the couch. I tried to turn on the TV to distract myself. The TV was on for a while. Then late at night, around the same time as the night before, I heard it again. This time I heard the ring from inside my bedroom. I had locked the phone in a drawer there. My throat tightened and I stood up. I went to the bedroom. The drawer was closed. The ringing was louder than the night before. I reached out, pulled the drawer open. The phone was there, the receiver rattling a bit with each ring. The cable and power cord were still detached. I hesitated, then picked it up and answered. The same rough voice greeted me. It said it knew. I removed the receiver from the base and smashed both pieces until they were in chunks of plastic and metal. There were no strange chips or anything that looked like a battery. It looked like a normal old phone, just smashed. Now I gathered the pieces into a plastic bag and tied it shut. I put the bag under the sink, then closed the cabinet door. I stood there for a while, breathing hard. I went to sleep with my bedroom door locked. I left the TV on in the living room, hoping to block out any sounds. It took a long time to fall asleep, and my heart felt like it was always beating too hard. The next morning I woke up and rushed to check the kitchen cabinet. The plastic bag with the phone parts was still there. Nothing had moved. I felt a bit better. I tried to be calm. I got dressed and went to work on the street. I kept looking at people's faces. No one seemed to care about me. I went to my desk and tried to work again, but it was hard to ignore what happened. I considered going to the police, but what would I say? A disconnected phone rang and some unknown voice spoke to me. I had destroyed the phone. Now I had no evidence. They would think I was joking or that I had a problem. I decided to wait. Maybe it was over. I came home that evening and nothing happened at first. I cooked some pasta, ate it standing in the kitchen, and tried not to think about the previous nights. I watched some TV, but I kept glancing at the spot on the side table where the phone used to be. There was nothing there now, just some dust. I thought maybe that was it. Maybe I had ended this. The hours passed slowly. I got tired and started to doze off in front of the TV. Then I heard it. It was not the ring of the phone. It was a different sound, a dull buzz. I got up and followed the sound. It came from the hallway closet near the front door. I opened the closet. My old cordless phone was there. I had forgotten about it. I had not used it in years. Its base was unplugged and the battery inside should have been dead for a long time, but it was lit up and the handset was vibrating with a buzzing sound. I picked it up. I did not want to answer, but I knew I had to. I pressed the green button on the handset. The rough voice spoke right away. It said it saw me destroy the other phone. It said it knew I had trouble sleeping. It said it heard me breathing hard yesterday. I felt a lump in my throat. I did not know what to say. I just listened. The voice said it would keep calling. It said it enjoyed watching me worry. It said it knew I wanted to run away, but that I would not get far. It said it knew my habits too well. It listed what I did after work, how I took the stairs instead of the elevator, how I crossed the street to avoid the group of strangers on the corner, how I stopped at the convenience store but left without buying anything. I felt dizzy. I gripped the handset tighter and asked again, "Who are you?" The voice ignored me. It breathed slowly, then said it would call again tomorrow. I pulled the battery out of the cordless phone and threw all the pieces into the same bag under the sink. I tied it tight, then I took the bag and walked out of my apartment, down the stairs, and dropped it into the large garbage bin behind the building. I looked around. The alley was dark and quiet. I saw no one. I listened carefully for footsteps. Nothing. I went back upstairs and locked my door. I checked every window. I unplugged my TV, my router, even my cell phone charger. I turned off every light except one in the hallway so I could see if anyone entered. I paced around my apartment. My forehead was damp with sweat. My hands felt clammy. When it got late the next night, I sat on the couch and waited. I had no landline phone now, no cordless phone, no other phone devices at all. I turned my cell phone off and put it in my pocket. I waited at the exact same time as before. I heard the sound again. This time it came from inside the bathroom. I pushed the bathroom door open. There was a small old radio on a shelf. I used it sometimes for news in the morning. It was off, unplugged, but I heard static. I picked it up, shook it, turned the knob. Suddenly it stopped and I heard the breathing again, now coming through the radio speaker. It was the same voice. It said it knew. I threw the phones away. It said it did not matter what I did, it would find a way. My arms felt weak. I nearly dropped the radio. I held it tight and listened. The voice said I should stop trying to get rid of my devices. It said it could use anything. It said it knew I was standing there wearing the same pants as yesterday. It said I should look at myself in the mirror. I turned and looked in the bathroom mirror. I saw my own face, pale with dark circles under the eyes. I felt my heart pounding in my ears. The voice said it would always be there every night at the same time. It said I could not stop it. It started laughing again and the radio went silent. I placed the radio down and backed away. My legs felt shaky. I stood in the hallway breathing fast. I pressed my back against the wall and slid down until I was sitting on the floor. I tried to calm myself, but I could not slow down my breathing. I reached for my cell phone in my pocket and turned it on. I considered calling someone, maybe a friend or the police, but I realized I had nothing normal to report. I could not explain how these devices were turning on. I could not prove anything. I just sat there, phone in my hand, staring at the empty living room. My stomach felt tight. My skin felt cold that night. I did not sleep. I waited for the next call or the next sign. Nothing happened until the next evening at the same hour. This time my TV turned on by itself. The screen showed static and through the speakers I heard the same voice, calm and rough, describing my day again. It knew where I went for lunch. It knew I changed my route to work again. It knew I tried to cover my windows with darker curtains before leaving. It said none of that mattered. It said it would always know. I stood there with the remote in my hand, pressing the power button. The TV did not turn off. I unplugged the TV from the outlet and the static continued. I dropped the remote and stepped back. The voice just laughed. My heart pounded. My breath got heavier. I reached behind the TV and yanked the cord so hard that I nearly fell over. Nothing changed. I put my hands over my ears and closed my eyes, but I could still hear it. I sat down on the floor, breathing fast, and waited for it to stop. After a few minutes, the laughter faded, the static died down. I opened my eyes and saw that the TV was off. The screen was dark. The silence was back. I waited, sitting there, too scared to move. I knew tomorrow night it would come again. I remember the first time I felt it. It was late, maybe past midnight. The house was quiet. I had turned off every light except the small lamp on the side table I was sitting in that old blue velvet Victorian armchair I had brought home the previous afternoon. I leaned back trying to get comfortable. It was firm and heavy. The fabric felt soft under my hands. Then as I settled in, I felt a cold pressure on my right shoulder. It tightened. For a second it felt like a hand pressing down, but I didn't see anyone. My heart kicked hard in my chest. I stood up fast and I looked at the seat cushion. It looked lower on one side, as if someone was still sitting there. I rubbed my eyes. When I leaned in, the cushion rose back into place. I didn't know what to think. I tried to tell myself I was tired, but my body didn't calm down. My legs felt shaky. I didn't sit in that chair again that night. The day before, I had seen the chair in an antique store across town. I went in because the place always looked interesting from the outside. The window showed old mirrors, clocks, lamps, and rows of furniture. I remember the dusty smell of old with the quiet hum of some fan hidden behind a stack of boxes. The owner was an older man with grey hair and a short beard. He barely looked at me. I walked through the aisles until I saw the armchair. Its blue velvet fabric looked clean and bright. Its wooden frame had detailed carvings that looked old, maybe from another century. The legs were sturdy and the armrests were wide. I checked the price. It wasn't cheap, but it was within my reach. I thought it would look good in my living room. I imagined myself reading and relaxing in it. I paid and arranged for delivery on the same day. When the delivery guys dropped it off, I placed it near the living room window facing the TV and a small bookshelf. The house was pretty empty at that time. I had moved in a few months earlier, and I was still decorating. The living room floor was hardwood and the walls were plain white. The armchair looked like the nicest thing in the room. I didn't notice anything strange. Then I touched the fabric. It was smooth, no odd smells, no stains, no loose threads. That first night before, for the strange feeling, I tried to read a magazine. I sat in the armchair for a few minutes. It felt a bit stiff, but it was old, so I didn't think twice about it. I got up, got myself some water, and turned off the main lights, leaving only the small lamp on. I thought I would try sitting there again, get used to it. That's when it happened, that cold, invisible grip on my shoulder. I tried to sleep after that, but I kept waking up, heart pounding, ears straining for sounds. I heard nothing unusual. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things. The next morning I stood in front of the chair and looked at it carefully. I pushed on the cushion. It felt firm. I pressed my shoulder against the backrest, trying to recreate that feeling from the night before. Nothing felt strange that day. I tried not to think about it. I went to work, came back late in the afternoon, cooked a simple meal and watched some TV from the couch. The armchair stood there silent and still. The room felt normal, but later that night I approached it again. I was still curious. I turned on a single lamp again, just like before. I stood in front of the armchair for a few minutes. Nothing happened. I sighed and decided to sit down. As soon as I leaned back, I felt that cold pressure on my shoulder again. It was firmer this time. I froze. I looked down at my shoulder. I saw no hand. I tried to move my body a little and the pressure moved with me, as if something was gripping me. My heart thumped. I stood up again. This time I saw the cushion sink on the left side, as if there was weight on it. I could almost see an outline of where a body might be. I stepped back. The cushion slowly returned to normal. My hands were sweating and I wiped them on my pants. I said nothing. I just stared. The chair sat empty. I went to the kitchen, splashing cold water on my face, and returned. I refused to believe it was real. I tried touching the chair all over, checking if there was some hidden mechanism. I found nothing. The chair felt normal. I tried sitting again. This time I felt the pressure almost immediately. It was on my right shoulder again, as if trying to push me forward. I stood up, breathing fast. I grabbed the armrest and shook it hard, but the chair was solid. I was angry and scared. My head hurt and I felt a tightness in my chest. I turned off the lamp and went to bed. Over the next few days it kept happening. I would come home, ignore the armchair for a while, but every time I tried to sit in it I felt that cold, invisible touch. It always came from the same side, always pressing on my shoulder. At first it was a simple pressure, but after a few nights it started to push more insistently. It was as if it wanted me to stand up and move somewhere. Whenever I got up I noticed the cushion would remain depressed for a moment, like someone rising slowly after me. It was not my imagination. I couldn't explain it, but it was real. I started feeling nervous in my own living room. I approached the armchair only in daylight, trying to figure out if there was something about the fabric or the frame. I ran my fingers along every seam, checked under the seat, looked at the wooden legs, tried to see if there was any kind of device. I found nothing. The store had not mentioned anything strange. It was just an old Victorian armchair, they said. I considered calling the store, but what would I say? That something invisible was sitting in it and pushing me around. A week passed. The feeling got stronger. One night I tried to resist it. I sat down and the cold hand pressed down on my shoulder. I tried to ignore it. I tried staying still and refusing to move. The pressure increased until it was uncomfortable. I felt my heart racing again, my jaw clenched. I couldn't ignore it. It made my skin crawl. Finally, I stood up. The pressure didn't disappear. It guided me around the armchair, nudging my shoulder forward. I felt it turning me toward the hallway that led to the back of the house. I stopped walking. I felt the pressure push harder. I started sweating. The hair on my arms stood up. I walked forward. The pressure lessened. As if satisfied that I was moving in the right direction, I reached the end of the hallway. There was a closet door there, along with a linen cabinet next to it. The pressure on my shoulder moved a bit, pushing me toward the corner where there was an old armchair cover folded on a small stool. I kept looking around, shining my flashlight from my phone, trying to see something unusual. I saw nothing special. The pressure let go as soon as I stopped near that corner. I stood there for a while, breathing fast, my back damp with sweat. I waited for something else. Nothing happened. I went back to the living room. The armchair looked normal. I touched it. It felt just like any other chair. The next evening I decided to follow the guidance more directly. I turned off most lights, left only one lamp in the living room, and sat in the armchair. The pressure started again, cold and firm. I got up and it pushed me toward the hallway. I followed it, guided me to that same corner. This time I started knocking on the walls and floorboards. At first it sounded solid, but near the baseboard at the bottom of the wall behind the stool I heard a hollow sound. I crouched down and touched the paint. It felt normal, but when I pressed a small section of the wooden paneling shifted. I pried it open with my fingers. A small piece of wood swung out, revealing a tiny hidden compartment. My heart was pounding. My mouth felt dry. I reached inside the compartment and pulled out a small metal box. It was old and rusted. It had a simple latch which popped open easily. Inside I found a stack of letters wrapped in old cloth. I couldn't read them right away. The light was too dim and my hands were shaking. I took the box back to the living room and placed it on the coffee table. I sat in the armchair. For the first time I felt no pressure on my shoulder. I looked at the cushion as I sat down. It stayed even. I waited. I sat there for a good 10 minutes, breathing slowly, staring at the box. Nothing touched me, nothing pressed my shoulder. The air felt normal, my body felt calmer. I got up and turned on the main light. I opened the first letter. The handwriting was old and uneven. It was dated from many decades ago, probably close to when the chair was new. It talked about the house, about some renovation, about hidden belongings. There were a few names I didn't recognize. The letters were short, mostly instructions and receipts. I didn't find anything valuable inside. They didn't mention anything supernatural, just old documents and notes maybe left behind by a previous owner. I closed the box and put it aside. For the next few nights I tried sitting in the armchair again. I expected the pressure to return. It never did. The cushion never sank, as if someone was sitting there. The seat felt like any regular chair. The blue velvet still looked nice. The frame still looked old and sturdy. Nothing felt strange anymore. I still felt uneasy in the house at night, but the armchair no longer bothered me. I even tried sitting there in the dark, leaving only one lamp on, just like before. Nothing happened. Over time I started to relax. I left the metal box in a drawer and tried to forget about it. I focused on the house. I bought a new coffee table, added some paintings on the walls, replaced some bulbs with warmer lights. The armchair became my reading spot. I would sit there in the evenings, reading the paper or flipping through a magazine. The fabric still felt soft. The chair still creaked a little when I leaned back, but that felt normal. Sometimes I wondered what caused that invisible hand to appear. It felt like it wanted me to find that hidden compartment. Once I had found it and removed the box, the pre-sentence vanished. I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't want to sound crazy. I just went on with my life using that armchair as if nothing strange had happened. The nights were quiet. I stopped waking up in the middle of the night. My heart stopped racing. When I entered the living room, the floorboards stopped creaking under my feet. Everything felt calm. I never found out who left that box there or why the letters were old and vague. I didn't pursue it further. I didn't feel like it was any of my business. I kept them in my drawer, but I never read them again. I never tried to locate the people mentioned in those letters. I just let it go. Now when I look at the armchair, I see an old piece of furniture that fits the room. I see blue velvet and carved wood. I feel a comfortable seat and a solid frame. I don't feel cold hands. I don't see the cushion sinking when I stand up, and I don't feel anyone guiding me through my own house. I sit, I rest my elbows on the armrests, and I enjoy the quiet. The house feels normal. I don't have an explanation. I don't need one. The presence is gone, and I can sit in my armchair without feeling a chill on my shoulder. I can lean back without feeling a push to move somewhere else. I can relax. My heart stays steady, my palms stay dry, and the room stays still. The armchair is just an armchair now, and I'm fine with it. I finish tightening the last screw of the old lock and push the door shut. I test the handle once, twice. It seems fine. I put the key in from the inside and turn it. It clicks smoothly. I pull on the door. It doesn't open. I frown and try again. Nothing. I turn the key the other way, expecting the latch to retract. It doesn't. I pull harder. No movement. The door is stuck. I try to turn the key again. As I do this, I hear a low laugh from the other side. It's faint but clear enough. The hair on my arm stands up and I freeze, holding the key. There's nobody out there. I lean closer and listen. There's a quiet scratch on the wood, like someone running their nails along it. I stand there pressing my ear against the door, my heart beating faster. I try the key again. The lock won't open. I live alone. I was replacing my front door's modern lock with an older antique one I found in the garage. I thought it would look nice and might be sturdier now. From inside my own living room, I can't open my front door. I test the handle again, pressing my shoulder against it. Nothing. I wiggle the key, pull it out, reinsert it, try again. No luck each time. The key turns. I hear that muffled laughing outside. It's not loud, but it's distinct. I feel my chest tighten. I look around the living room, expecting something to have changed. Everything looks normal. My couch, the television, the coffee table with a few magazines, a lamp in the corner, a small cabinet near the wall. Nothing unusual. I lean in close to the door and speak quietly. Hello, I ask. I wait. There's a dry scratching sound. In response, it's like fingernails or maybe something sharp being dragged slowly across the door's surface. I can't see anyone through the peephole because I had removed it earlier to install the antique lock. The door is solid wood with no glass panels. I have no idea who or what is out there. I try to keep my voice steady. Who's there? No direct answer. I wait, pressing my palm against the door. I feel a slight vibration, like a gentle tapping from the outside. My throat feels dry. I step away and try to think. I can leave through a window if I have to. I walk to the window facing the street. It's locked. I unlock it and try sliding it open. It's stuck. The old frame sometimes swells and I usually have to put my shoulder into it. I press hard, it won't budge. I try the other window by the television. Same thing. I never had this much trouble opening these windows before. Something feels off. I can't explain it, but my hands are shaking. I check the back door. It's in the kitchen. I turn the knob and pull. It's jammed too. I try to twist the deadbolt, but it's stuck. I return to the front door holding the key in my hand. I insert it again and turn it slowly. There's a small creak as I try to pull the door open. The laughter outside resumes. It sounds like someone holding their mouth close to the door and chuckling softly, almost as if amused by my attempts. I try to ignore it and focus on the lock itself. The lock is old heavy, made of iron. It should work fine from inside. I installed it according to the instructions. It can't just fail like this. I kneel down and examine it. The keyhole, the latch, the strike plate all look correct. I push the door expecting it to move at least a little. It doesn't budge. My hands feel sweaty and I wipe them on my pants. I feel trapped and I don't understand why. I consider kicking the door, but the wood is thick and solid. I'm not sure I can break it down easily. Besides, whoever is on the other side might be waiting for me to do just that. I don't know who they are or what they want. I feel a strong urge to shout at them, tell them to leave me alone, but I hold back. I don't want to show fear. Instead, I press my ear against the door again, listening closely. There's a faint whispering. I can't make out the words. It sounds like a low voice muttering something. I follow hard. I think I hear my name, but I can't be sure. I lean closer and my forehead touches the wood. The whispering grows slightly louder, but the words are still unclear. It almost sounds like it's telling me something about my living room. I catch a few words. Inside the room, secrets hidden. Look. I back away, feeling a chill in my neck and arms. It mentioned the living room. I look around again. Everything is ordinary. I notice my old cabinet in the corner. It's been there for years. I keep a few old tools in it, some documents, and a small wooden box I've never bothered to open. I got that box from my grandfather's house after he moved away. He said it had some old letters or something inside. I never felt the need to check. Right now, with this voice outside talking about secrets, I can't help but wonder if it wants me to open that box. My breathing is heavy. I clear my throat and try to stay calm. I move over to the cabinet. The door creaks as I open it. Inside there's dust and a few old things I barely remember placing there. A screwdriver, a pile of old receipts, a folded cloth, and the small wooden box with a simple latch. It's about the size of a paperback book. It's slightly worn at the edges. I pick it up and hold it in my hand. It feels heavier than I expected. I look at the door, at the key still in the lock, and then back to the box. I feel foolish doing this, but I can't ignore the strange whispering and laughter. I unlatch the box. It opens without a sound. Inside there are a few photographs and a small envelope. The photographs show my old living room arrangement years ago. There's a photo of the cabinet itself and next to it a small safe I used to keep under the floorboards. I almost forgot about that safe. I removed it years ago, but I guess I never threw away these photos. The envelope is sealed. I hold it under my nose. It smells like stale paper. I tear the top open carefully. Inside there's a folded note. The handwriting is neat. It's a short message. Do not forget what you left behind. The door will not open until you face it. My heart pounds. I read the note again. I feel a prickling in my scalp. The voice outside must know about this, but how? I don't know what I left behind. Maybe it's talking about something I stored away. I remember that safe. I took it out a long time ago and hid it in the attic. Maybe it's talking about something inside that safe. I'm not sure. I put the note down and look around. I need to try something else. I walk back to the door and try the key again. I turn it slowly and listen. The laughter returns, then stops abruptly. A voice, very quiet, says, "Find what you hid." I feel panic rising in my chest. I run my hand through my hair and try to think. My attic is accessible through a hatch in the hallway ceiling. I could climb up there if I move a chair and poke the hatch open. Maybe I'll find that old safe. I hesitate because the idea of going into the attic makes me uneasy. It's dark, cramped, and full of dust, but I have no choice. I want to get out of here. I drag a chair from the dining area into the hallway. I stand on it and push the attic hatch open. Dust falls into my face, making me cough. I pull myself up, my arms shaking a bit. The attic is dim. I use my phone's flashlight to look around. Boxes, old luggage, some broken furniture, and in the far corner I spot a familiar shape. It's that old metal safe I once had. I crawl over the beam and reach it. It's a small safe with a combination lock. I recall the combination, my old apartment number. I dial it in and pull the safe's handle. It opens. Inside I see a stack of papers, some documents, and a few items I didn't remember keeping. An old wristwatch, a set of keys I don't recognize, and another sealed envelope. I open this envelope. Inside is a single note. Show them what you hit. Put it in plain view. I look at the objects. I'm confused. Sure, who? The voice outside. I don't understand what is going on. I swallow hard and turn off my phone's flashlight. For a second it's completely dark, and in that darkness I hear a soft creaking sound from below, as if the door at the bottom of the attic ladder is shifting. I switch the flashlight back on and crawl back to the hatch. The door below is still closed, of course. I climb down, my knees shaking slightly from nerves. In the awkward position back in the living room, I spread the contents of the safe on the coffee table. The documents are old rental agreements, a birth certificate, mine, some bank statements, nothing unusual. The wristwatch is broken, its glass face cracked. The keys have no tags. The note said, "Show them what you hid." I have no idea what that means. I try the keys on my front door lock just in case they don't fit. I think about putting these things next to the door. Maybe that's what it wants. I place the papers and the watch on the floor near the door. I wait. Nothing happens. I try the key in the lock again. It's still stuck. I listen. The whispering is louder now, and I can make out words, not those. The secrets in the room inside. I step back and glance around the room again. My living room isn't large. There's a couch, a coffee table, a TV stand, a cabinet, and a lamp. I check under the couch cushions. I find nothing but some coins and a pen. I check under the couch itself. Lying flat on the floor, there's dust and a box of old photographs I once shoved under there. I pull it out and look through the photos. They're mostly family gatherings, old friends. I lost touch with some co-workers from years ago. I feel uneasy flipping through them. My heart is beating faster and my stomach feels tight. The voice outside says something again, but I can't understand the words. I plaque the box of photos on the coffee table, leaving them out in the open. I walk back to the door and try the key again. This time I feel a slight give. The latch seems to move a little. My chest tightens with hope. I pull the door handle, still stuck, but now I hear a low whisper, closer, deeper. Show everything. I understand now. The voice wants me to expose everything I've hidden away. In this room, I open the cabinet and remove every single item. I line them up on the coffee table, old receipts, tools, that wooden box and its photos and note. I go into a small side closet and pull out some boxes of old clothes, old letters I saved from past relationships, old notebooks. I spread them all out on the couch and table. I stand back, panting, feeling sweat trickling down my neck. The living room is a mess now. Everything is out in the open. I approach the door and put my ear against it. The whispering is quieter now. I try the key again. The latch moves more. This time I feel the door shift slightly in its frame. I hear a soft, satisfied sound from outside. It's not laughter now, it's more like a faint hum. I tug on the handle. The door moves a fraction, but still not enough to open. I realize I haven't shown the items from the safe to the door. I pick up the wristwatch, the keys, the documents, and place them on the floor right in front of the door. I feel silly doing this, but I have no better idea. I return to the lock and try again. The key turns more smoothly, and I hear a click. The door still won't open, but it's closer now. I press my shoulder against it. It's as if someone outside is holding it shut. I wait, listening. The voice speaks again quietly. Everything is out. You are free. My heart jumps. I try the door one more time. This time the door opens an inch. I see the hallway outside empty. And still there's no one standing there, no shadow, no person. I push harder. The door opens halfway. I step back, stunned. The hallway looks the same as always, just quiet and empty. I lean out, look left and right. There's nothing unusual. The laughter and whispering are gone. The scratching has stopped. I stand there holding the door open with one hand, looking around my empty living room that I just turned upside down. My chest feels tight, but I'm relieved. I step out into the hallway. The air outside feels normal. I turn back to look at the door. The old lock looks fine. I test it again from the inside, leaving my foot in the door frame so it doesn't lock me in again. Now the key works normally. The latch clicking back and forth as it should. I don't know what to think. I don't want to think. I just stand there breathing slowly, trying to calm down. I consider calling someone, maybe a locksmith or a neighbor, but it's late and I don't feel like explaining this. I walk back into my living room and look at the mess. Everything I hid away is now out in the open. I feel uneasy, but also relieved that I can move freely again. I pick up the keys from the safe and test them on my back door. They fit perfectly and unlock it. I open the back door and see my empty backyard. I lock the back door again and return to the front. The hallway outside is still empty and quiet. I close my front door but leave it unlocked this time. I sit on my couch surrounded by old letters, boxes and scattered memories. My heart rate slows and I feel the tension in my shoulders easing. I don't hear any laughter or whispers anymore. There is just quiet. I stay there breathing, looking at everything laid out around me. It feels strange, but at least I'm not trapped. At least I can leave now whenever I want. I don't know who or what was outside that door. I don't know why it forced me to drag all these old things out, but I know that for now it's over. The door works again. I'm free to go. I don't plan on using that old lock ever again. I noticed the tapping sound on a Wednesday night after I turned off the TV. It came from the wall behind the couch in my living room. It wasn't loud, it was a steady, soft knocking. I remember feeling my stomach tense. I got up and walked over to the wall. I pressed my ear against the painted plaster. The tapping continued. I tapped back gently and it stopped for a moment. Then it started again like a response. I could feel my pulse pick up. I had lived in this house for about 3 years and I had never heard anything like this before. I stood there for a while and tried to figure out what could be causing it. The pipe, some kind of loose wiring, maybe an animal trap behind the wall, but the knocking didn't sound like scratching or scurrying. It sounded like a knuckle tapping on wood. I moved the couch out of the way and pressed on the wall in different spots. Nothing felt loose. I didn't see any cracks or holes. Over the next few days the tapping continued. It was always at night. It didn't happen during the day, or at least I never noticed it. Then I started sleeping on the couch to listen for it. Each night around 11 o'clock it would start a soft, steady knock. I would lean in and try to pinpoint the exact spot. It seemed to be coming from the upper part of the wall near the ceiling. I wanted to check the attic, but there was no attic above the living room. It was just the roof. I tried to ignore it, but each tap made me sweat a little. My hands would get clammy and my throat would feel dry after about a week of this. I decided to look at the old blueprint of the house. I still had the folder from when I bought the place. I found it in a box in the bedroom closet. I opened the folder at the kitchen table and spread out the large sheets of paper. I traced the outline of the house with my finger. Living room, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, hallway. Everything matched what I knew, but on one of the older blueprints dated about 50 years ago, I saw an extra room marked off behind the living room wall. It didn't show up on the newer documents. On the old blueprint there was a small rectangular room behind that wall, accessible through what looked like a narrow door. On the newer blueprint it wasn't there at all. It was just empty space. I stared at the plans. I looked at the current measurements, the house's listed dimensions, and the current measurements didn't quite match. According to the older blueprint, the house had a small hidden area that was later removed from the official records. I felt uneasy. I rubbed my eyes and tried to think of a logical explanation. Maybe the space had been sealed off during renovations, but why would they seal off a room? I carried the blueprints to the living room and pressed them against the wall, trying to see if the door might have been covered up. The tapping didn't happen that moment, but I knew the spot. It was right behind a portion of the ceiling's plaster. If the old blueprint was correct, the door might be somewhere in that area. I grabbed a flashlight and a step ladder from the garage. I climbed up and tapped lightly on the ceiling. It sounded hollow in one spot. I pushed harder and I felt a slight give, like a board that wasn't nailed down properly. I got down and brought a small hammer and a flat pry bar. I climbed back up. My heart was beating fast. I felt my chest tighten. I was nervous. I didn't know what I would find. I knocked out a small piece of the ceiling's plaster. Dust and debris fell on my head and into my eyes. I wiped my face on my shirt and shone the flashlight into the hole. I could see a wooden beam and some old boards. I pulled more pieces down, widening the hole. The air coming out smelled stale and dry. As I widened the gap, I noticed the edge of a door frame behind the boards. It was a narrow wooden door frame that had been covered up. The wood looked old and dark. I reached in and felt a small door knob. It turned easily, but something was blocking the door from opening fully. I used the pry bar to loosen the boards. After a few minutes of struggling, I managed to yank out a couple of the wooden planks. The door swung inward. I climbed a bit higher on the ladder and stuck my head inside. I aimed the flashlight into the space. I saw a small room about 8 feet by 8 feet, completely empty except for something on the far side. There was a single candle on a small metal holder mounted to the wall. The flame was burning steadily. There were no windows. There was no visible wiring, just that one candle burning and never going out. I felt cold air against my face. The smell in there was musty and old. The silence was absolute. I didn't hear the tapping anymore. I swallowed hard and stepped up and through the door. The room was cramped. I could stand, but barely. The ceiling was low. The walls were bare. With the candle was the only source of light. I looked around and I saw something else next to the candle. It was a painting. The painting was of me. It was my face, but the features were twisted into an impossible grin. The eyes were too wide, the mouth stretched too far. It was clearly me wearing the same shirt I had on now. My chest felt tight and I broke into a sweat. I approached the painting. My legs felt weak and my hands were shaking. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and quick. The paint looked fresh, the brush strokes were smooth. I reached out and touched the corner of the frame. The wood felt dry and rough. The candle light flickered on the surface of the painting. The grin seemed to move. I jerked my hand back. I couldn't tell if it was actually moving or if it was just the light playing tricks on me. I looked at the candle. It was a thick white candle. No wax seemed to drip. The flame didn't flicker much. It was steady and bright. I held my hand over it and I didn't feel the heat. I expected it was warm but not hot. I tried to pinch the flame out with my fingers. My hand shook. I pressed my fingertips together around the flame, but it didn't go out. My fingers got warm but not burned. I tried blowing on it. The flame danced for a second, then went right back to its steady burn. I took a step back. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I wanted to leave. I glanced back at the painting. It was still there, my face with that horrible grin. I leaned in and looked closely. I could see every detail like it had been painted with an extreme level of care. My own eyes in the painting looked glassy and wet. My teeth were shown in a strained wide smile. The face in the painting felt like it was staring directly at me. I backed away until I hit the wall behind me. I tried to understand what I was looking at. There was a sealed-off room in my house with a candle that never went out and a painting of me wearing my own clothes. I looked down at my shirt and touched it. It was the same shirt I hadn't changed clothes since I started exploring. The painting looked recent. The paint didn't smell fresh, but it looked like it had just been finished. I turned and walked around the small room. I tapped the walls. They felt solid. I ran my hand over the wood. There were no windows, no vents, nothing else at all. The door I came through was still open. I looked back through it and saw the hole in my living room ceiling. My living room lights were off, so only the flashlight and the candle lit the space. I felt like I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. My stomach felt sick. My mouth was dry. I licked my lips, but they stayed dry. I decided to take the painting out of there. I approached it again, grabbed the frame with both hands and lifted. It came off the wall easily. Behind it was just more wood. I carried the painting to the door. As I moved it, I felt a slight resistance, like it weighed more than it should. My legs shook. I stepped through the door and into the ladder area. I held the painting close to my chest. I wanted to see it in better light. I backed down the ladder slowly, careful not to drop it. When I got into the living room, I leaned the painting against the wall and aimed my flashlight at it. I turned on a lamp in the corner. The painting looked the same. My face with that weird grin. The grin reminded me of a strained expression, like someone who can't relax their muscles. I ran my hand over my own face to check if I was smiling. My face felt normal. I wasn't smiling. I tried to see if the painting was signed. It wasn't. It was just me wearing a grey t-shirt and jeans, the same clothes I had on now. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone had done this as a prank. Maybe the previous owner sealed off that room and left this behind. But how would they know what I would wear tonight? How would they keep the candle lit without any fuel? I paced around the living room, breathing hard. I kept checking the painting, hoping it would somehow change or reveal something else. It didn't. I climbed back up the ladder and looked into the room again. The candle was still there, burning steadily. I wondered if removing the painting would change anything. I looked around the small space again. It felt even emptier now. I listened for the tapping. It was quiet. I shined the flashlight in every corner. Nothing, just wood walls, low ceiling, that strange candle still in its holder. I stepped inside again and tried to remove the candle, I gripped it at the base and pulled. It didn't budge. The holder was attached firmly to the wall. I tried twisting the candle, it wouldn't turn. The flame stayed the same. My throat felt tight. I tried to calm down. I touched the flame again. It didn't burn me, it just felt like warm air. I gave up and stepped back out. I didn't want to stay in that room. I felt my neck and shoulders ache with tension. I carried the painting to the kitchen and placed it face down on the table. I examined the back of it. There was nothing unusual. It was a wooden frame with a canvas stretched over it. I ran my finger along the edge of the canvas. It felt normal. I picked at one corner, trying to see if anything was hidden under the paint. Nothing came off easily. I stood there holding the painting, breathing through my mouth. I was sweating. My shirt stuck to my back. I wanted to wipe my face with a towel. I grabbed a dishcloth and pressed it against my forehead. I needed to check the blueprint again. I spread it out on the kitchen counter according to the old blueprint. There had always been that small room. According to the newer documents, it didn't exist. The door had been sealed. I thought about calling someone to check it out, maybe a contractor or a neighbor, but what would I say? I turned off the kitchen light and walked back into the living room. I shined the flashlight at the hole in the ceiling. The door was still open. I could see the candle flame flickering slightly now, probably from the draft of the open door. I felt a sudden urge to close that door and sealed the room off again. I didn't want to think about it anymore. I climbed the ladder one more time and carefully replaced the wooden boards as best as I could. I nailed a few back in place and covered the hole with a piece of drywall I had in the garage. I would have to plaster and paint over it later. For now, I just wanted to hide it. When I climbed down, I looked at the painting again. That grin, it bothered me. It made my skin crawl. I turned the painting to face the wall. I didn't want to look at it. I stood there listening. No tapping, just silence. I turned off the flashlight and went to the bathroom to wash my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My expression was normal. My eyes were tired and red. My jaw was clenched. I took a deep breath and splashed water on my face. The water was cold. It felt good on my skin. I walked back into the living room and sat on the couch. I looked at the wall where I heard the tapping. It was quiet. I looked at the ceiling where I made the hole. It was covered now. I stared at the painting which was facing the wall. I ran my fingers through my hair and tried to slow my breathing. I sat there for a long time waiting to see if anything else would happen. Nothing did. Everything stayed calm. After a while, I got up and put the painting in a closet. I stood in the closet for a moment, just holding it. I wanted to throw it out, but I wasn't sure if that would make things worse. I didn't know what to do with it. I finally pushed it behind some boxes and closed the door. Then I went back to the living room and sat down again. I spent the rest of the night awake, listening, waiting. No tapping, no strange sounds, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the soft creaks of the house settling. I kept feeling the sweat on my palms. I wiped them on my jeans. I yawned, but I couldn't relax. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the grin. In the morning, I opened the closet and checked the painting again. It hadn't changed. It was still me, still smiling in that twisted way. I closed the closet door and walked away. I told myself I would get rid of it later. I told myself I would forget about the candle in the secret room, but I knew it was there behind that patched ceiling, burning silently in the darkness. I remember the moment I saw that cassette tape at the bazaar. I was standing in a cramped aisle between old kitchen utensils and dusty cardboard boxes. There were metal shelves packed with random junk. On the top shelf, I spotted a small pile of tapes with no labels. One of them drew my attention because it had a crack on its plastic shell and no sticker. I picked it up and wiped some dust off it with my thumb. I felt curious. I did not think much of it at the time. It just seemed like something I could take home and check later. I bought it for a few coins and slipped it into my pocket. When I got home, my apartment felt quiet and still. The curtains were closed and the afternoon light came in through a narrow gap near the window frame my old cassette player sat on. A low table next to a chair and a lamp. I placed the tape inside and pressed play. At first I only heard a faint static noise. I turned up the volume. After a moment I heard some voices. They were low and rough. A few people speaking close to the microphone. They did not introduce themselves and I could not understand what they were talking about. They seemed to be whispering about something. I noticed that one of the voices sounded strained, as if the speaker's throat was dry. Another voice hissed out words without much tone or emotion. I rewound the tape and pressed play again, trying to catch a clear sentence, but it was mostly fragments of words. I stopped the player and looked around my apartment. Nothing was out of place. The furniture looked normal. I still felt curious. I sat down on the chair and pressed play once more. This time I heard them mention something about the lamp and a chair. At first I thought they were describing some other location, not my apartment, but then I realized they were talking about objects around me. I became uneasy. I glanced at my lamp and my chair. The voices mentioned behind him and on his left. I turned my head to the left. There was a bookshelf and a stack of old newspapers. I heard the tape mention something about old newspapers as well. I paused the tape. I swallowed hard. I wanted to test this. I stood up and moved a few objects. I took a pair of shoes from near the door and placed them under the window. I rearranged a chair. I moved a cup from one side of the table to the other. Then I pressed play again. After a short burst of static I heard them speak again. One voice said something like he moved the chair and the cup. Another voice said check the shoes near the window. I felt my throat tighten. I stopped the tape again. My heart beat faster. I noticed a light sweat forming on my forehead. I slid the tape out and examined it. The plastic looked ordinary except for a small crack on one corner. I put the tape back in and pressed rewind, then play. I listened carefully. The voices were discussing my actions. They said I was holding the tape. They said I was leaning forward. They pointed out that I was wearing a dark shirt and jeans. I checked what I was wearing. Dark shirt, yes. Jeans, yes. I paused again. I looked around. The apartment door was locked. The windows were shut. I was alone in the room. I heard no one outside. The building's hallway was usually silent at that hour. I tried to remain calm. I pressed play again. The voices sounded closer, as if recorded moments before. They said he just looked at the door. I realized I had just done that. They said his right hand is on the tape recorder. It was true. They described the way I leaned over the table, the angle of my head, the way my left foot tapped the floor. I stopped the tape and stood still, trying to understand how this was possible. I waited for a few minutes, then I pressed play once more. Now they said he is standing still, not moving. Listening closely, I felt my stomach knot. I wondered if there was some hidden camera in my apartment. Maybe someone was watching me from outside. I checked every corner of the room. I looked behind the curtains, opened the closet, looked under the table. I saw no devices, no cameras. I put my ear against the wall, trying to hear neighbors. Nothing. I returned to the tape and rewound it again. I played it once more. The voices were whispering about something that worried them. They said he is checking the closet. Then another voice said he thinks he can find a camera. I felt the blood rush to my face. This was too strange. I opened the window a bit and looked outside. I saw the empty street. There was no one on the sidewalk, no parked cars with suspicious equipment. I closed the window and locked it again. I tried something else. I wrote a short note on a piece of paper and placed it on the table. I just wrote the word test in big letters. Then I pressed play again. The voices mentioned the note. They said he wrote something on the table. He is testing us. I yanked the tape out, feeling a surge of anger and fear. I sat down and held the tape in my hand. It felt warm. I held it close to my ear. I heard no sound coming from it directly, only when I played it. On the cassette recorder, I considered leaving the apartment, but I wanted to understand what was happening. I had an old battery-powered cassette player in a box under my bed. I took it out, inserted fresh batteries, and tried the tape there. The same thing happened. The voices described my actions as I performed them. They had no emotion, no explanation. They only stated what I did and what objects were in front of me or behind me. I pressed stop, ejected the tape and set it aside. I tried playing a normal music tape to be sure my player was not malfunctioning. The music tape worked fine. I played a regular cassette with an old radio show I had recorded years ago that sounded normal. I tried the strange tape again. The voices returned, discreet, describing my movements in the room. I had no idea how this worked. I tried moving to another room, the small kitchen at the back. I pressed play there. The voices mentioned the kitchen sink, the plates, the cups in the drawing rack. They described the position of my hands. I felt colder. My arms got tense. I had small tremors in my fingers. I stopped the tape and walked outside my apartment, locking the door behind me, taking the tape and player with me. I stood in the building's hallway and pressed play again. The voices described the hallway. They mentioned the paint peeling on the wall, the old doormat on the floor, my shoes tapping the linoleum. I pressed stop. I walked down the stairwell to the building's lobby. I sat on a chair near the mailboxes, pressed play. The voices described the lobby. They said he is sitting near the mailboxes. He is holding the tape player on his lap. I looked around, only a dim overhead light and empty space. No one was watching me. I walked outside onto the sidewalk, pressing play again. The voices described the street outside, the asphalt, the cracks in the pavement, the old lamp post, the small patch of weeds near the curb. Everything, they said, matched what I saw around me. They said he is looking over his shoulder. I realized I was doing that. I stopped the tape and took a deep breath. I needed to do something more drastic. I took a cab and went to a quiet parking lot near a supermarket a few blocks away. I sat on a low wall, pressed play. They said he left his apartment. Now he is at a parking lot near a supermarket sign. He is watching a red car parked in front of him. I looked up. There was a red car there. I cursed under my breath and turned off the player. I tried pressing record on the tape deck. I wanted to record my own voice. I wanted to overwrite these voices. I held down record and spoke into the microphone. I said my name, my address, the current time. I described the sky. Then I released the record button and rewound the tape. I pressed play. I expected to hear my own voice. Instead, I heard the same rough voices describing my attempt to record. They said he tries to record over us. He is speaking into the microphone. He wants to erase us. They laughed. It was a dry coughing laugh. I felt my breathing get faster. I pressed stop, pulled the tape out and threw it on the ground. I stepped on it. I pushed my heel down. The plastic cracked a bit more, but not enough to break it completely. I picked it up, inserted it back into the player and pressed play. The voices said he tried to destroy the tape. I could hear a slight distortion now, but they were still there. I decided to go back to my apartment and avoid using the tape for a while. Maybe it would stop. I needed to calm down. I took the bus back home. I sat at the back of the bus holding the tape player in my bag. The bus rattled over the street. I felt sweat under my arms. The other passengers stared at their phones or looked out the window. No one paid attention to me. When I reached my stop, I walked back inside my building. I went upstairs to my apartment, entered and locked the door. I placed the tape on the table and stepped away from it. I drank some water from a bottle in the kitchen. I tried not to think about the tape. After a few minutes of silence, I decided to try one more time. I picked up the tape player, inserted the tape, pressed play. The voices said he is back in his apartment. They listed every object in view again. I stopped the tape and tried fast forwarding all the way to the end. I reached the end and pressed play. The voices still talked about me in the present. There was no end to the recording. No matter where I cued the tape, it always described my current surroundings. I tried rewinding it to the start and pressing play again. Always the same effect. I could hear my own breathing become loud in my ears. My throat felt tight. I wanted to get rid of this tape. I opened my window, considered throwing it outside, but I did not want anyone else to pick it up. I closed the window. I grabbed a roll of duct tape and taped the cassette holes. Then I pressed play. The voices were muffled, but still there. They said he is trying to cover our tape. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. I walked to the bathroom, closed the door, turned on the faucet and tried playing the tape. There they described the bathroom mirror, the towels hanging on the rack, the dripping faucet. I turned off the faucet and listened again. They described me leaning against the wall holding the player. I pressed stop and put the player down. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My face looked tense, my eyes a bit red, my mouth drawn tight. I said nothing. I picked up the player and walked into the living room again. My mind was focused on one thing. I had to find a way to make these voices stop. For 4